All right. I am now joined by the People's Economist, Rob Larson, uh, community college economics professor, frequent contributor to Current Affairs magazine, where he is called their House Economist, and author of several books, including Bit Tyrants, a new one coming out about the ruling class, and the one with my favorite title, Capitalism and Unfreedom, the Toll Road to Serfdom. How you doing, Rob?
Doing great, man. Thanks. It's great to be on. I'm excited to watch some contested subjects get chewed over tonight.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of contested subjects, before we even get to the debate that we're watching tonight, I don't know if you remember the episode of The Simpsons where Bart gets an elephant, but those clowns in Congress, they've done it again.
How does he keep up with the news like that?
Yeah, exactly. So in this particular case, they're just the clowns in Congress have really been on a roll the last day or so. They've purged Ilhan Omar from Foreign Affairs Committee. Because as I understand it, she did an anti-Semitism by suggesting that the massive amounts of money that's spent lobbying, in the interests of various foreign governments like Israel and Saudi Arabia actually has some effect, that they're not just wasting the money.
That's right, Ben. Now, of course, as sensible listeners, we recognize that analysis veers into anti-Semitism, as the press has described it. So I would like to apologize to everyone for the anti-Semitism we engaged in when we implied that people spend money for reasons.
Yeah,
we wish to withdraw this.
Obviously not. Obviously, all of the money that's spent by the pro-Israel lobby, like all the money that's spent by the pro-Saudi lobby, like all the money that's spent lobbying for any number of governments.
They just like hanging out with Congress people. They just like expensive lunches a lot. It's face value, people. Don't look below the surface of things. That's what we always say.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just you just pay for the pleasure of the congressman's company. You're not getting you're not actually, when you organize these trips to have members of Congress visit Israel and get the propaganda tour, when you organize gala events, when you help to corral fundraisers for people's campaigns, none of this could possibly have any effect on U.S. policy towards Israel, because if you admitted that it did, I don't know if we're allowed to admit that lobbying on behalf of other governments has any effect, but this one, apparently it's anti-Semitic to say that has an effect.
I really feel that if it was Iran or China doing the lobbying and getting policy votes, I feel like I would hear about it more as a news consumer. Yeah. It's pretty gross, it's great, Omar standing tall, Sanders standing with her, but it is a pretty gross moment, in fact, to behold this stuff.
No, it is a pretty gross moment. And part of what makes it gross is that the glorious leader of the Democratic caucus, Hakeem Jeffries, threw her under the bus in the course of sort of criticizing the decision.
You wouldn't think that the biggest recipient of hedge fund donors would do such a thing, but you'd be surprised. I'm surprised all the time because I don't understand anything. So
yeah, no, fair enough.
It's again, these people are spending money to hang out with Republicans. I mean, if you learn about these congressional Republicans, they're delightful. Who wouldn't want to pay just to hang out with them? I mean, I want to hang out with people who took 300 votes just to choose who gets to say they're in charge. That's that's the beginning of it.
HG says anybody seen Ben's debate with some French accent and crypto feudalist who's talking about JF Garepi. Meyer, how called Ben can stay with his people, I'd have yelled at some point. I appreciate that. That's so anybody who does not know what he's talking about, I think we actually are going to unlock that as part of Monday's show. So that's something to look forward to then. But thinking about this, fact, I remember Hakeem Jeffries said something, I don't remember, a couple of years ago, which was actually a reference to something like a joke on Chapo about how he wasn't going to bend the knee to democratic socialism.
We almost got him. Damn.
I know. Very, very close.
It's just so fucking. Don't worry, I will not do any popular progressive policy that the base wants. Just to immediately reassure everyone, I will continue to suppress their policy desires. That's best. Really, I will say I can't think of anyone more suited to carry on Pelosi's work, though. Like he is like her like true form. Like he's just like a perfection of her.
Absolutely. I mean, I will say that I think that she, in her loathsome way, I think she was probably a more effective political operator than Hakeem Jeffries, but like ideologically, yes.
So far, it's pretty bad. I assume the kid learns on the job, right? I don't know.
No, fair enough. Maybe he'll get better at serving the forces of evil over time. And, he can be there as a depressing, immovable object, symbol of democratic mediocrity for decades and decades, just like Pelosi was. Yeah. I would. So Hakeem's not gonna, he's not gonna bend the knee to democratic socialism. And if anybody doubted that, the other thing the clowns in Congress just did, including quite a few Democrats, in fact, the majority of the Democrats, is they mobilized to vote for a concurrent resolution to speak out against the most pressing problem facing America today, which, you guessed it, is also socialism. So this is the concurrent resolution. Concurrent resolution denouncing the horrors of socialism. And I just thought, it's all right. I have a socialist economist who writes books about this stuff here. Let's just before we get into the debate, I want to talk a little bit about Congress's analysis of the horrors of socialism. Just for context, every single Republican, no exceptions, in the House. There are three who I think didn't show up for the vote, but every single one who showed up and voted cast a yay vote for this concurrent resolution, 100% unanimity. Democrats, there were 86 nay votes, 14 cowards who voted present, and then 110, I think, something like that. 100 and something yay votes, right? So there was a clear majority of Democrats who voted for this shit too, including, I would note, a couple of ones that are actually like most of these, like, look, Hakeem Jeffries votes or something like this. It's not just, it would have to be surprising in some way to be disappointed, or out of character, or out of step with the concerns of his donors or anything like that. But like Ro Khanna voted for this shit, who was, is actually, he's a mixed bag, and and I think he does, I mean, in certain respects, sometimes I think he is kind of, Ro Khanna D Silicon Valley, but I do think that, but on the other hand, I think he is an above average Democrat in many ways, certainly a strong supporter of Medicare for all, has better than average positions on tech censorship and on, de-escalating superpower tension so we don't do World War III. And was in fact a big supporter of Bernie Sanders. And I mean, he was the chair of it's an honorary role, but still, of Bernie Sanders' campaign in 2020, and he voted for this. And I want to tell you about his excuse for that in a moment. But first, I want to just look through this. So, whereas socialist ideology necessitates a concentration of power that has time and time collapsed into communist regimes, totalitarian rule, and brutal dictatorships. All right, fact check. Professor Larson, what do we think about this?
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Thank God I arrived just in time to learn about this friggin' disgrace. This is pretty rich, obviously. So, I'm just learning about this right now for the first time. It's actually true. This is great, though. So bear in mind, this is a country that everyone agrees is the most capitalist in the world that's had a falling lifespan for 8 years. Falling, not standard of living, which has been flatlining or falling for like most of my lifetime. Jesus, like this is just falling span of your godforsaken scratching for healthcare money American life. Okay, and the first thing it mentions here, yes, thank you, Ben. Socialism necessitates a concentration of power. Concentration of power. Here's a fun exercise. I'm going to read to you a little headline from the Wall Street Journal today. This is today. This is from this morning. The bosses are back in charge. CEOs are reasserting their authority now that workers are starting to worry about job security amid rising layoffs. Quote, this whole concept of working from anywhere went too far. And it describes here how, quote, America's bosses are starting to feel bossy again. And it shows very clearly, like toward the top of the article, companies and sectors doing big layoffs, you see, that are happening, reflecting that, they're feeling, CEOs are feeling more in charge because more people are getting fired. The job market's weakening. My colleagues will tell you, of course, that labor markets are efficient because you go to the work where you're most marginally productive, and that's how your compensation will be determined. But right here, I'm learning that as soon as the job market softens, yes, executives are feeling very much back in the saddle. Yes, everyone's talking about yanking away the generous working from home benefits. Several CEOs referring to this. The balance of power in the labor market shifted toward workers. This is so confusing because I'm seeing right here that socialism necessitates a concentration of power. And here on the front page of the highest circulation newspaper in America, very conservative, owned by the Fox News billionaire Rupert Murdoch, bosses back in charge. So who's in charge? Who has power? It's just confusing. I can't draw any conclusion from this. I'm just confused. Yeah. So, but obviously, thank you, thank you, Leader McCarthy, for, making sure that the system that has a shrinking lifespan and CEOs are in charge, according to themselves, is safe from concentration of power, which that sounds like a fucking nightmare.
Definitely can't have concentrated power. That would be terrible. You wrote a book about monopolistic practices of tech companies. And I'd also just, point out, if you're, I'd be interested to know, okay, so what's the opposite of concentrated power, right? Like if you're talking about diffused power, lots of people having power, then if you have a system, I'll just go to my go-to example of this. Like if Amazon was a worker-owned cooperative, then, it might not have totally flat wage scales because, you could still, even if everybody got to vote on this stuff, some kind of operating agreement, you might convince people that some people needed to earn a little bit more than others for one reason or another, that if some people were doing particularly, demanding jobs with lots of stress and responsibility, or they had rare skills that, and you really needed to entice them in to recruit them, that you'd have to offer them a little bit more than everybody else. Conversely, you might actually have to offer people more if they're doing particularly dangerous or unpleasant jobs in order to entice them to do it. But I don't know. I kind of think if you were like, hey, this whole thing was Jeff's idea originally, so I actually think we should just vote to give him so much more than the rest of us that he will actually have like the take-home income to buy his own spaceship. I don't know. I don't think you're going to win that vote. And I think that tells me something about, concentrated power versus diffuse power. Do you have one person who's in a position to just decide how the pie is divided up, or is this decision diffused among a lot of people?
Yeah, that would seem to be the issue here. But right away, it's you don't want economic power. We have free markets. It's free markets. This is power. Like I think you're overthinking this, Ben. I think you and I really struggle with this on this show. We overthink things a lot. Again, let's focus on the surface level here. Yeah, there's no discussion of exactly what a dispersed power landscape would look like. I mean, you have your classic American pre-capitalism from the early 1800s, so lots of little smallholders and stuff. I mean, that was the early ideal. But even then, the moment you have industry, you have these railroads that are just holding every farmer and rancher by the nuts. Like the moment you get big scale industry, you invite these giant concentrations of power, totally irrespective of all like the feudal ones in Europe and the slave aristocracy in America who were there at the beginning of it, of course. Like it's a short-lived tale.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that going back to an economy where everybody, you can have private ownership of the means of production, but still have super dispersed power because everybody is like, a subsistence farmer or, maybe a like small shopkeeper or something. And like, if you work as an employee for a little while for one of those, then, before you know it, you'll have your own place, whatever. I think for a variety of reasons, that's pretty wildly unrealistic for a complex, high-tech modern economy, that you could have it be organized that way. But also, even putting that aside, I mean, like what? I want to know what kind of aggressive trust busted Speaker McCarthy would be willing to support to at least take us a couple of inches back in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, like always, all I ever think about when I look at this stuff is like this is just pitching directly to like the right wing media, landscape, and it's just like this stuff continuously. Like, I don't know, I gotta say, they never get tired of the hits there. Maybe that's the key to this.
Yeah.
They hate it when their band comes and plays the new album. They want the classic.
Yeah, the most dreaded phrase that now something from the new album. You
get booed off the stage of Fox News with that shit.
Yeah, exactly. Look, you go to a Skinner concert because you want to hear Freebird. Like that's you go to Republican congressional resolution because you want to hear about the 100 million people who were killed by communism.
Yeah,
but
exactly, if we allow the government to negotiate prices for Medicare purchases of pharmaceuticals, tomorrow Joseph Stalin will come into your home and take away your record player.
No, exactly, and I like HG's point about the dictator of Sweden because there is this interesting phrase here. A concentration socialist ideology necessitates a concentration of power that has time and time again collapsed into communist regimes. Wow. So I don't know how to read that except as a historical claim that democratic socialist governments have time and time again collapsed into totalitarian capital C communist dictatorships. And I've got to say, I'd be fascinated to hear what the list is of the times that happened. Like they say, time and time again. Right? So it's like more than once, right?
Yeah, I don't think that list would stop with the Weimar Republic. Yeah, it's.
I mean, yeah, there's no. You could maybe say, that. Certainly when the Bolsheviks came to power, there was some kind of. I mean, depending on whether you sort of go with the anarchist or the Trotskyist version of this history, right? There was an aspiration, or at least a claim to an aspiration, or whatever. However, you come down on that to something more democratic than what they ended up with. But that would be one, right? Like, it's not it's not like it's not like Mao came to power saying we're going to do democratic socialism, right? And then somehow it just evolved into into something more like the Soviet model. I mean, came to power as somebody who spent decades as a supporter of that model very explicitly. Like it just this claim always drives me crazy because it's just like I don't know. I know I'm being like a weird pedantic nerd about this, but like literally this just didn't happen.
Yeah, it's real frustrating, And there are cases, look at like Spain, the Civil War. I mean, you have a big. Very legitimately socialist, indeed, kind of actually communist part of the eastern portion of the country that Orwell wrote about. And next, it's conquered by fascism. I mean, the real criticism of socialism is it's vulnerable to whoever's next door stomping on its beautiful premises the moment people get too free for their britches. I mean, that's the real criticism to make.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are real
intervention by bastards.
Democratic socialist governments collapsing into dictatorships, but not communist dictatorships. Right. I mean, like we've been talking, like you said, about, you kind of mentioned Weimar, and I mean, I could maybe not exactly that, but like Chile, right? That's a nice example of that, but not what they seem to mean. Okay, so there's some stuff. There's some the Black Book of Communism numbers that are. I mean, it's sort of distasteful to be to like review somebody's math as they're running down historical atrocities, but it's also, I think, not a very serious number. There's fact, I think I want to give credit where credit is due. There's if you follow this Twitter account, that Soak Done Left, they had a good Substack piece about how all of these sort of victims of such and such system, whichever direction it is, like graphics that you see, always like in the rare examples where they bother citing sources, it's always like terrible methodology that like mixes together all kinds of different causes of death, and it doesn't. It just ends up with unhelpful hyperbole. But I want to skip to whereas many of the greatest crimes in history were committed by socialist ideologues, including Vladimir Lenin, Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong, Fidel Castro, Pol Pot, Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-un. That's interesting. That North Korea is the only one that gets is the only one besides the Soviet Union that. No, Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro.
And Maduro, yeah, they're willing to recognize the legacy acts,
which is also just funny because there is I think this really shows how broad a brush they're painting with here, because if you actually know anything about Venezuela, there's it's like a left government that came under severe attack, ended up doing a lot of things that there's plenty of room for criticizing, no doubt whatsoever about that. But also, that's not a communist country in any normal sense. I mean, even at the height of Chavez's welfare state, before they started doing austerity, they had a public sector that, as a proportion of employment in the overall economy, it was bigger than the U.S., but it was smaller than France.
Indeed. And, we're always talking about much, much, much poorer countries in the first place, most of which got exploited by us and or the Europeans for centuries on end. The moment they become leftists, all their fucked up problems become socialism's responsibility. So, I mean, it's Amartya Sen did the definitive, in my mind, refutation to these kind of numbers. The great Indian economist, Nobelist, as I recall, nowhere near a socialist himself, technocratic social democrat sort of type, I suppose. He made the point that during the colonial period, India, we would have famines all the time as Britain raked off agricultural exports and used them to feed armies, including during World War II when India had this horrible famine because it was fighting Britain's wars. And since independence and its, Cold War, India had some social democratic stripes. It's kind of a back and forth with a lot of these states. But these famines stopped. He made the point that just prioritizing the basic welfare of the citizens of these countries is one of these things that we consider to be socialist. And suddenly we care about these millions of people who are killed. Whereas, you can't find a historian who can name how many millions of people got killed under our colonies and under IMF austerity to this day. I mean, these countries are in debt to our richest and Europe's richest citizens, and they export money way in excess of what they get in aid. And we're the ones who are the necks on millions of people today, just to put the flip side actual context of this bullshit in view.
Yeah, no, exactly. I also, somebody pointed out in the chat, it's kind of funny that they left Ho Chi Minh out of the list of communist tyrants.
Yeah, that's an oversight right there.
Maybe it's just awkward, brings up bad memories to mention them.
Yeah. There's no need for us to mention that.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot here about the crimes of Stalin and Mao. Would just briefly note that, given that very obviously the actual target of this is Bernie Sanders, the squad, the whole point of a resolution like this is to isolate the few politicians in Congress who would call themselves democratic socialists and sort of embarrass and divide Democrats by getting them all to either condemn those people, condemn the label used by those people, or be lumped together with them. So given that, it's spending all this time on the crimes of Stalin and Mao is okay, what do you think the point of that D in the DSA was right? When they founded the organization, like why is it that you suppose that like Bernie Sanders says democratic socialism? What might you think he's trying to differentiate it from? But I do just want to point out, because this is a particularly amazing inclusion here. Whereas the socialist experiment in Cambodia led to the killing fields, in which over 1 million people were gruesomely murdered, that one, like, if we're talking about crimes that were committed by the Cold War, there are plenty to go around by various sides, but that one goes in our column. Like,
yeah. People aren't aware that before 75, we spent 5 years bombing, just completely obliterating Cambodia, large parts of which were semi-Neolithic societies that were not part of like French Indochina colonial systems. Unbelievable. That goes on for 5 years and destroys their society and creates all their support for weird freak splinter groups like the Khmer Rouge that are taking power like all over the place. When you look at these margins, these horrible marginal entities that take over revolutions, it's usually because the Western countries or someone else is stabbing a country continuously that's going through a revolution or civil war. And that hurts, people who have moderate views that appeal to people. It militarizes everything, puts everything in all the power in the hands of everyone who's willing to get a gang up with rifles who can actually just make things happen, whether they're democratic or not. Like this is that one's just like flatly in our column, though. Yeah, that's just like a bookkeeping error. Put that shit exactly on the wrong side, bro.
And really to like underline and circle that, it's not even just that the United States, that never would have happened if the United States hadn't destroyed that society in the first place, although that's certainly true. I mean, like I remember the instructions that Henry Kissinger infamously passed on from Richard Nixon to the Joint Chiefs of Staff: anything that flies on anything that moves. But also, like, I don't know. I mean, I've been rereading Manufacturing Consent to write something for Jacobin about it, and
that's great.
Yeah, it's a good book. But there's something they get into in there. I mean, like, this is not a conspiracy theory or a secret. Like, the United States supported the Khmer Rouge as an anti-Soviet and anti-Vietnamese thing, because when Vietnam invaded the Cambodia precisely to stop the killing fields, the U.S. working through Thailand actually propped up the Khmer Rouge to sort of create an ongoing headache for Vietnam and the Soviet Union. And again, this is not a claim of secret knowledge or something. There are UN votes that you can point to where
it's all on the record, man. It's all on the record, Mr. McCarthy.
Yeah, I mean, the United States had voted to give the Khmer Rouge Cambodia's UN seat rather than the pro-Vietnamese government. All right.
If you're going to have your sham condemnation of really positive economic ideas, that's fine, but don't just openly fuck it up. And remember, Stalin dropped atomic weapons on Japan. Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we got some stuff about North Korea, but then this is another one of my favorite parts. Whereas the Castro regime in Cuba expropriated the land of Cuban farmers and the businesses of Cuban entrepreneurs, stealing their possessions and their livelihoods, which literally, man, there've got to be more real horrors than this. Are you counting as a horror the fact that in this brutally unequal society that existed in Cuba before the revolution, that people who owned these hyper exploitive sugar plantations got their land taken away from them? That's one of the horrors of socialism. So that they redistributed the wealth held by Gusanos and the mafia and all the people. Basically, if you think about the scene in Godfather 2 in Cuba, right? That all of those people's wealth going to provide things like healthcare and education. That's one of the horrors of socialism.
God, it makes your skin crawl. I love this too. Yeah, specifically these exile Cubans exiling millions with nothing but the clothes on their backs and all the money in their American bank accounts, which I imagine they would have, because many, many decades it was a client state of the United States. People would go there to their honeymoons and shit. These people have money and they were able to pull all their assets out. I got to say real fast, thank you, commenter, physics PhD, for remembering the point that I fucking mangled earlier. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you very much. That's you should be up here.
Yeah. Amartya Sen quote from the comment is India seems to manage to fill its cupboards with more skeletons every 8 years than China put there in its years of shame. And it's also, it's like, look, I mean, if we're talking about obviously different waves of emigration from Cuba at different times happened for different reasons. Like lots of people who, took off for Miami in like the 90s were just like economic migrants, but like if you're talking about the people who were explicitly referenced earlier there, the ones, the farmers and entrepreneurs, right? Like, and I think when we say farmers, if you're thinking about Ma and Pa Kent, the Cuban countryside, like, adjust your image of the kind of farms we're talking about in a lot of these cases. But those in many cases, we're not leaving with this, with the clothes on their backs. And also, again, I just like whatever legitimate criticisms you can make of Cuba and its system. I mean, like the fact that in a like really like like the Batista dictatorship, when it was no more democratic than it is now, but things were run much more to the liking of the United Fruit Company and the CIA and the mafia, that they took away the hoarded wealth of elites at that time and used it to provide for the material needs of the people on the island. I mean, that's surely the best thing about Cuba, right? I mean, like that goes in the list of horrors.
Yeah, indeed. And additionally, I wanted to mention this earlier, just referring back to Venezuela too. Like Chavez is a very different beast from Maduro. Like Chavez conformed to electoral results and lost referenda and went, all right, you're making a mistake, but broadly accepted their outcomes. He was reelected overwhelmingly several times. I always love this stuff. Like, we declare you to be a dictator, so you were. And then, we lock a country out of the financial system and try to overthrow it a couple times and circle it with military bases, like Cuba or Venezuela, and fucking shock. They come out as like fucking hyper-authoritarian. That's what you do when you surround a country with, attacks and threats and blockade it. It would be weird if some strong man didn't end up in charge. Like, people want that when they're under attack and siege. They want someone to be in charge. Like, we encourage all that shit with our policies toward these countries every fucking day that we threaten them. And, we say, like, all options are on the table with Iran. Like, that's a war crime. That's a threat of aggression right there. Every part of this that's bad by these regimes, we inflame and aggravate with our nonstop dick swinging hawkish bullshit.
Totally. And yeah, as you say, I mean, Chavez did win, re-election and survive recall referendums in internationally supervised, free and fair elections. That's, I mean, like really, I mean, yes, I mean, a lot of much more objectionable stuff has happened since, which is not to say that, I mean, you can, walk and chew bubblegum on this, right? They have a, you can think that there's like, grounds for criticizing, the Venezuelan government, for violating various important norms, but also think that we should, leave those people the fuck alone and not try to dictate who their president is. From the United States, but
I do love that. Yeah, we declare him your president. That's a great move. Like, more of us should be declaring other people. More of us should declare people in charge of other people. Like, that's a funny. I think we're missing a comedy opportunity by not doing that.
Totally. I was just looking at my Facebook memory the other day. Was right when that happened. I responded by declaring on my private social media that I was recognizing Jeremy Corbyn as the Prime Minister of the UK and calling on all parties to abide by my decision, and that all options were on the table to enforce this.
Yeah, all options.
Which, okay, granted, that didn't work. It was no more successful than the Guaido.
Well, Ben, yeah, exactly.
Less successful. Exactly.
It was no more of a failure than what we did with Guaido. Like, you can at least, it was a success? Perhaps not, but we took a stand. Yeah, Ben, exactly. I really admire you, Ben, for how brave you were in taking that stand.
Yeah, I exactly. Very brave.
I'm going to write an op-ed for the Washington Post about it because we're very brave.
all right, now we're done with the horrors of socialism, and we've got the general principles that are being appealed to. Whereas the author of the Declaration of Independence, President Thomas Jefferson, wrote, by the way, it's weird to you can't just say Thomas Jefferson. Like, people don't know who that, I guess not. To take from one, because it is thought that his own industry and that of his fathers has acquired too much in order to spare the others, who or whose fathers have not exercised industry and skill, is to violate arbitrarily the first principle of association, the guarantee to everyone a free exercise of his industry and the fruits acquired by it.
That's good. It still kind of amazes me that we're still referring back to these guys for let me remind you that the incredibly blameless early presidents of the United States had these nice sounding things. These guys owned and sold people who they could have sex with without their consent, and we're supposed to still be very impressed at what they said about this stuff. It just kind of amazed me. But my favorite part, of course, and this is the only thing I've ever had to say about these guys in print, is just if you go back to their very well documented and recorded correspondence, it's kind of amazing the things they would say about the system they were setting up in the U.S. and about how it was devised to protect property against the majority, and how the main source of divisions in society were caused by their access to property. I mean, that's in a letter between Madison and Jefferson. The actual record of these assholes is amazing. So, people, when people slow the conversation down to a slow bore by bringing up the founding fathers, remind them of the founding fathers' own saucy anti-capitalist remarks from their sunset early industrial revolution years.
Yeah, I mean, this is just it's worth noting that this is a really, really extreme libertarian principle here, that you can't take away anything from one, right, to help another. I mean, that's not just don't set up a communist dictatorship. That's that's don't have public schools and social security and disability and payments and all that stuff, right, is taken seriously. Say, oh, well, you should have tried harder with your industry. Same thing with the quote from Madison. Just below that, to explain who James Madison is, it's not a just government, nor is it property secure under it, where per property which man has in his personal safety and personal liberty is violated by arbitrary seizures of one class of citizens for the service of the next. And it's okay, I mean, I don't know why super extreme ideologically inflexible libertarian principles are supposed to be more appealing because 18th century slaveholders endorsed them.
Yeah, I do. I gotta say, the vibe I'm getting though, you're commenting on how they're and President James Madison, they can just go, and remember, let's us always remember that Madison said this, and everyone would understand it. There's something about this President James Madison, it really has a high school report feel to it. And President James Madison, the third president, he was from the state of Delaware, and he wrote this. It just has a little, I feel like they were padding the word count on this bill. I think their teacher said it had to be 180 words, and they were stretching it out.
Yeah, exactly. It's, I don't know. I mean, I'm writing something for the Daily Beast about this, but I mean, my hot take here is that, none of this exactly reeks of ideological self-confidence to me. If they want to, I mean, the obvious point of all of it, right? It's nobody's worried that there's going to be, nobody's worried that the United States is about to become a Stalinist dictatorship, right? That's not on the cards. The people they're attacking are democratic socialists who are pushing, an extremely minimal program of.
I mean, these are glorified New Deal liberals, barely more than that. I mean, I don't know. That's I wouldn't quite put them in that.
But I mean, whatever.
Pretty mild
however exactly you classify people.
Yeah.
I think at least in Sanders' case, I mean, he does come from he does come from a socialist background, and I think he ultimately dreams bigger or whatever. But like, it's still the point is just that it's like the things that are being pushed at this particular historical junction in the United States are pretty modest, and I think they're showing their hands with the Jefferson and Madison stuff at the end, right? Because it's like, this isn't like, don't set up a Stalinist dictatorship stuff. This is, you can't give everybody health care because that would be seizing the property of one class of citizens to, benefit the rest or whatever. And it's like, okay, but if you were really confident about that, just say that, right? Make your case, man. I don't know why we need to like meander through, the Russian Revolution and Venezuela and Pol Pot and, the quotes from the founding fathers. I mean, like this all just kind of sounds like, if anything, somebody like played the hits to themselves in like an increasing, with an increasing lack of confidence that they're actually in a landscape that like they just need to whisper the word socialism and everybody will fall into line, which I have to say, like, if anything, I
only
think
half of them fell into line, Ben. So
I mean,
only half of them did. So
I mean, imagine that there had been a House resolution to condemn socialism 10 years ago, it would have been 100% of them.
Indeed. I'm actually surprised how much it split the party. Being totally honest, that was the first headline. It was like Fox News splits the Democrats. I'm like, really? Tell me more about splitting the Democrats. That's it's incredible. It's true. Like, this is their condemnation of socialism, like at the beginning of their new Republican term. Now that they've picked a leader after 6 trillion votes, it should be more fiery. This is stale. I agree. Like, there's not like a lot of fire of, like there's no like Jesuit reactionary fire in this. It's nothing. It's all just stale, repeated shit from Glenn Beck's TV show and half remembered talk radio shit. Whatever congressional 20-year-old staffer wrote this, did their best, I'm sure. But
yeah,
you think that like, one of these freaking reactionaries would be really dying to put pen to paper on this and do it. Like, this is copy pasted from the Tuttle Twins website. There's just nothing here. Disappointing. Disappointing. Do better, McCarthy. That's what I say.
Yeah, exactly.
If you want to be our socialist nemesis, you're gonna have to try harder than that. Yeah, got here.
All right. Well, with that out of the way, let's watch some of this debate. I think, for the sake of time, we might not watch all of it tonight, but I think that we could at least watch a few chunks of it. Certainly, including the one that drew our attention to it in the first place. Which is that one of the debaters, you will see in a bit, wearing her nice presented in an Oxford suit, is our friend and comrade from Jacobin, Meagan Day, which I'm super excited to see. But let's watch some of the introductory stuff first.
Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity. And I'm glad that the debate motion was changed, that a global nightmare. Because a global nightmare has befallen this world with more than 20 million people on the brink of famine in Afghanistan, 75% of Iraqi children outside schools trying to provide food to their families, 16 million people in Yemen marching towards starvation, 12 million people in Syria facing acute food insecurity, and millions of people in Libya living in extreme poverty. All this due to the pursuit of America's global dream, a dream of imperialism, self-interest, exceptionalism, and corporate greed. Members of the House, Mr. President, I'm standing here today not as an American citizen, nor as a hater of America. Instead, I am here as a global citizen who has seen first-hand nightmares of America's global ambition. From systematic racism and inequality at home to the carpet bombing of entire civilizations, the American dream has offered the globe nothing but nightmares. I'll be making 2 arguments in support of this motion today. Firstly, that the very foundation of American dream and its pursuit embodies nightmare for the world. and that the American dream is nothing but a dream of war economy and corporate greed that can only bring nightmares. But before that, it falls upon me to introduce side opposition. Speaking first for side opposition will be Laura Smith, a graduate officer at the UN, also from St. Anne's College. Now, Laura is doing her second PhD in American presidential history. I'm not sure which American presidential dream will she brag about, because the last time I read, it was Truman who nuked the world, it was Kennedy who invaded Vietnam, and it was Bush who invaded Afghanistan and Iraq. So there is no American dream left in her history. Speaking second is Scott Brown, a Republican politician and a diplomat who served as the US Senator from 2010 to 2013, and also appointed as US Ambassador to New Zealand by Trump. Now, Scott has made multiple attempts to re-election, but has lost. I wonder if he is still pursuing his American dream. Speaking third is Alexander Vindman, a retired US Army Lieutenant Colonel and former Director of European Affairs at the National Security Council. I want to warn Mr. Vindman in advance to raise his defenses high, because I will make sure that American forces are in the line of fire from this side of the House. Speaking fourth is Neil Cattell, an American lawyer who served as acting Solicitor General of the US under Obama. Now, he's also a partner in the law firm Hogan Lovells. Neil describes himself as extremist centrist. I don't know what to make of that, Neil. Mr. Speaker, these are your speakers, and they are most welcome. My first argument tonight, that the very foundation of the American dream and its pursuit embodies nightmares for the world. The idea of American dream, in the literal sense, was put forth by James Adams in his book, The Epics of America, in 1930. He described this idea as a dream of land in which life should be better and richer and fuller for everyone, where the opportunity of each according to ability or achievement. Adam even clarified this, that it is not a dream of motor cars and high wages merely, but a dream of social order. While Adam's intentions were that of equality and social order, in time following World War II, America was swift in commercializing the American dream. The concept of American dream turned into myths, delusions, exceptionalism, individualism, and greed. It was sold to the American people through Hollywood, American products, and to the world through American interventions, under the Christmas wrapping of freedom, democracy, justice, and equality. But in reality, members of the House, it embodied nothing but deaths and sufferings. At home, it came with the institution of slavery, millions of Americans without health insurance, racial blindness, massive inequality. Abroad, it achieved the annexation of Mexican land, 400 military interventions since its foundation, one of the highest contributors to global warming, human rights violations, war crimes, and the list goes on. It came with the idea that America cannot be judged by the standards applicable to the rest of the world, the same standards it sets for others. Since World War II, under the pretext of nation building and promotion of democracy, the US administration has been involved militarily in more than 15 countries, from China to Vietnam to Libya to Afghanistan to Iraq. The very foundation of American dream, I argue, globally has been imperialism. This dream has turned functioning countries like Libya, Syria, and Afghanistan into failed states. It supported Saddam Hussein, then took him out. Financed the Mujahideen, then bombed them to smithereens. Was allied with Gaddafi, then left him to crowds. Fought against the Taliban, then handed the country in plate. America's global ambition has been the cause of world disorder, the destruction of Middle East, and the starvation of millions. Let's look into the nightmares of Afghanistan. Since the invasion of 2001, the Afghan people had to pay a colossal price for American dream of 50,000 civilian casualties, displacement of millions of Afghans, and the destructions of billions of infrastructure. Between 2016 to 2022, 2,122 airstrikes were conducted, 3,677 casualties, all civilian, 40% of which were children. If they talk about freedom, democracy, and justice, members of the House, it's your responsibility to remind them of August 2021. After 20 years of war, Afghanistan handed back towards Taliban. Remind them of the moments of crowds rushing towards a closed gate, children pushed against barbed wires, desperate people clinging towards aeroplanes and falling from the sky just to leave the country. Remind them that in Afghanistan, their dream turned into nightmare in the form of war crimes, human rights violations, and crimes against humanity. Spencer, you can always WhatsApp me. Let's look into Iraq, where the American dream of oil turned into a nightmare. Iraq's invasion was again packaged as delivering America's values of freedom, democracy, and justice. Well, it has been 19 years since Iraq was invaded. But ever since, chaos and destructions have clutched the cradles of this old and magnificent Mesopotamian civilization. It was the invasion in the Iraq that led to the formation of ISIS. ISIS would not have existed had it not been for the US to invade Iraq. The real American dream in Iraq was about what? Oil. To quote Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel, people say we are not fighting for oil. Of course, we are. Libya is another example of America's nightmare. 8 years after the start of US-led military intervention, the overthrow of Gaddafi to promote stability, Libya is still in civil war. But amid all this chaos, one will expect accountability and the rule of law from the United States. And that has not been seen either. Where was the accountability when the International Criminal Court wanted to investigate and prosecute the United States for war crimes in Afghanistan? Instead of facing justice, Trump imposed sanctions on the families of ICC officials. However, when it comes to Russia, China, and Iran, America is the first one to ask for accountability from the same court it wanted to impose sanctions on. What about the accountability from Guantanamo Bay and the undisclosed locations where hundreds of prisoners were taken? The physical abuses, torture, rape, and killings in the Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq are still fresh in the memories of millions of Iraqis. This is what the American dream has been for the world for the last 20 years alone. But my second argument is this, that the American dream will be always a nightmare because that dream is based on a war economy and corporate greed. While America projects itself a vision of peace, heaven of democracy and concord, in reality, war is necessity for the pursuit of American dream. American economy is a war economy. It maintains hegemony in the world through war. Its science and technology are deeply entrenched in the military machine. The 20-year war was an extraordinary success for the American military complex, composed of private dealers, lobbyists, and Pentagon officials. The US has the largest share of global armed market for the 18 years of the past 20 years. 61% of the global arms sales in 2019 came from the United States. But here are some eye-opening facts and statistics from Brown University Center for International Policy report. And this is what they provide. Pentagon spending has totaled over 14 trillion since the start of the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, with 1/3 to 1/2 of the total going to military contractors. The US has half of the world's 10 largest military defense contractors and 43 of the 100 defense companies. 1/3 of all Pentagon contracts in the last 10 years have gone to 5 companies: Lockheed Martin, Boeing, General Dynamics, Raytheon, and Northrop Grumman. The arms industry used ample tools at its disposal to influence decisions over Pentagon spending. The industry has spent $285 million in campaign contributions since 2011 in presidential elections, congressional elections, and the House of Senate. Now, but it is more than that. 1/3 of the Senate members of the Defense Subcommittee of the Appropriation Committee own stock of the top 5 defense contractors. 51 members of the Congress and their spouses own between 2.3 and 5.8 million worth of stock in the companies that are among the world's top 30 defense contractors. 4 of the past 5 US secretaries of defense came from one of the top 5 armed contractors. For example, Trump administration Secretary of Defense James Mattis came from board members of General Dynamics. Biden's administration defense secretary, Lloyd Austin, board member of Raytheon Technologies. Members of the House, Mr. President, $2.3 million was spent in Afghanistan. 87% went to the top 5 defense contractors. And out of the 2.3 trillion, only a fraction spent on rebuilding, and 80 to 90% went back to the US economy through this company. And the biggest and most controversial market for the US weapon in recent years has been the Middle East, where the weapons have been used for killings of masses and millions of Yemenis who are starving to death at the hand of blockades. But to come to my conclusion, as you can see, the American dream is based on war economy, doomed to bring nightmares for the world. Outside this border, the freedom to dominate, humiliate, and subjugate, usually in the service of America's real religion, the free market, has been the successful story of American dream. It is a global bully who possesses the largest stockpile of weapons of mass destruction, chemical, biological, and nuclear. It has fought the most wars, account for most human rights violations in modern history, and has sponsored, armed, and financed untold numbers of dictators and despots. And to quote Jonathan Turley, war may be hell for some, but it is heaven in a war-dependent economy. And that has been the case for American dream. The opposition would go and glorify America as the savior and protector against Russia, China, Iran, and other despotic countries. But be aware, members of the House, don't be misled. Remind yourselves of the global nightmares of the American contractors of Afghanistan, of Iraq, of Libya, of millions of people who are starving at the hands of American foreign policy. Remind of the only country who has used nuclear bomb in this world, none other than America. That is what American dream is for you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
All right, that was the first speaker. I should say, if there's any confusion about this, they for some reason they split up the YouTube video into different videos for each speaker. I'm not quite sure why. There doesn't seem to be a video of the whole thing, but that is just the first chunk of the debate. I guess one thing, before I throw to Rob, that did hit me about that is that I'm really glad he mentioned Yemen, since this is something that's like that usually when people talk about American foreign policy, they'll think about Afghanistan, they'll think about Iraq, they'll certainly think about Ukraine right now, but everybody kind of forgets about Yemen like 99% of the time, and they really shouldn't, because the United States has been instrumental in providing military aid to Saudi Arabia, as well as drone support for a war that has, last number I saw was something like 400,000 people had lost their lives in a country that's not very big to start with.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, 400,000. I think the estimated Russian war losses so far are 200,000, and Ukraine's are thought to be similar. So, I mean, in a much smaller country than either Russia or Ukraine, looking at a comparable number of deaths, and I mean, just so much more complete life ruining to everyone who lives in that poorest country in the region to start with. Yeah, that's an incredible legacy, and that's true. I gotta say, this kid's great. I love this young gentleman. I think he's going to go on to big things. That's a pretty, I guess sometimes it's easy, when our workaday jobs, thinking about how much we hate capitalism, it's easy to forget just how shitty our specific country is sometimes. So I'm glad we have a guy like this to use reality check. That was pretty, especially that bit at the end. Only country in nuclear one. We have all the weapons of mass destruction. We've launched more wars than anyone else. Like, damn, this kid's killing us up there. Oh my God.
Yeah,
pretty effective. No notes really. I mean, he did better than I could do. I want this guy to date my daughter or something. I'm very impressed.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. This actually came up in my discussion with JF on Tuesday. Somebody asked something in the chat about comparisons between the United States and Canada, and I was like, look, I mean, it's not like I don't think there's anything going for the United States in that analogy. I think the Noam Chomsky has acknowledged on various occasions that, the legal protections of free speech and separation of church and state in the U.S. are some of the best that exist anywhere in the world. Certainly, if you're going to compare us to Canada, we one thing we have going for us is we don't have the humiliation of having King Charles as our official head of state. But like, I know, right? I mean, just imagine.
That's a tough one.
Just imagine that's a tough pill to swallow. But like, if you're talking about America's role in the world, then yeah, I mean, my God, right? I mean, I always remember. You remember Barry Crimmins, the comedian?
Yeah, I know him. I haven't heard that in a long time.
Yeah, so he was a leftist comedian. Who's as David Feldman says, but really an old lefty from way back, right? But I actually used to have, and this really shows how old I am. I used to have a cassette tape of a stand-up album by him. He's doing like lefty political stand-up, and I remember in that album, which I listened to many times, there's a line in there about how people say, if you don't love America, you should go live someplace else. He says, well, I don't want to be a victim of America's foreign policy.
It's dangerous enough to be a victim of our domestic policy.
Exactly.
You don't want like foreign policy. That's just, it's a ticking clock.
Yeah. All right. Let's, yeah. And I should say, by the way, the Yemen thing, I actually have an article coming out tomorrow morning in Jacobin about this, since, speaking of clouds in Congress, the J.D. Vance just wrote this op-ed in the Wall Street Journal.
I enjoyed that. I saw, yes, more Wall Street Journal content. That's 2 articles referred to in a half hour.
I know, right?
It's the best newspaper.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And he endorses Trump in 2024, which, isn't shocking because, he wouldn't be in Senate if he hadn't effectively sucked up to Trump after having previously denounced him in an earlier period.
Well, I'm sure he'll denounce him again and then endorse him again, much as he did previously. I assume the cycle will live on.
Yeah, as the winds shift, right? I mean, if it seems like he has to go over to DeSantis for a while, I'm sure JD is more than capable of making that shift. But and certainly JD Vance wouldn't be in the Senate if not for the extraordinary largesse of pro-Trump billionaire Peter Thiel, who donated $15 million to his super PAC, I believe, which is just unprecedented for that kind of campaign.
Fairly stratospheric amount, yeah.
Yeah, but the point of the op-ed, right? He wasn't saying like, "Oh, I'm supporting Trump because he cut taxes for rich people, and I want him to do more of it next time," which would at least have the virtue of being honest. And it's
that'd be.
I don't share his goals, but fair enough, makes sense from your perspective. He said he supported Trump because Trump kept the peace. He didn't start any wars.
Yeah,
which you got a lot of asterisks on that claim.
Yes, as I tweeted at the time, it wasn't for lack of trying, and just had linked to something about the assassination of Iran's General Soleimani.
Yep.
Just fully fucking rocket struck a really senior dude, like just to let him know. Like, it's just to let us know. Fucking like if China wiped out Kamala Harris, and they're like, that's just to remind you to keep your nose clean.
Yeah, exactly. And I would point out also, it's like, yeah, I mean, sort of saying that didn't turn into a full-scale war with Iran, and like patting yourself on the back for that is like
shit that they decided not to escalate. Like, wow, way to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Have someone pat yourself on the back because you're too fat to do it. Have someone do it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's like, yeah, that's great. Like, that's like if you go around a dry forest setting off firecrackers, none of them actually turns into a forest fire, gonna take a victory lap over that.
I'm voting for drunk ex-dad, not the new dad. I don't like him. He's boring.
Yeah. I will say the suits at Jacobin cut my favorite sentence from the article, which is
I hate that.
Which is congratulate, which is praising, giving Trump as much credit as Vance seems to want to, for not engaging in even more belligerent action around the world than he did, is a little bit like asking the jury to consider all the people that Jeffrey Dahmer didn't eat. But But like one of the asterisks is that there was actually a bipartisan push that passed the Senate to cut off American aid to the Saudi war effort in Yemen, and Trump fucking vetoed it. He doubled the rate of drone strikes there. That's, if that's what doves look like, I would hate to see the hawks.
That's like the lowest rung of being anti-war too. Just like stop crucially helping the shittiest country in the world, Saudi Arabia, like continue just double tapping funerals for previous victims of their war, just like oh god, just like untouchable, unfathomably vile thing. I wrap that up. Like what a Prince of Peace he is. At least the Europeans weren't trying to kiss his ass so much they gave him the Nobel Prize.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's watch.
That's funny.
It's a good line. Let's watch part 2. This is the first speaker in opposition. So we're going to hear the case that the American dream has not become a global nightmare. So I'm excited to see what that case looks like.
The fella's got his work cut out for him.
I'd like to thank our president for the opportunity to speak here tonight. I last spoke here on the other side in favor of U.S. global leadership this time last year. And after the speech, Ahmed came up to me and he said, "Great speech. Didn't believe a word of it, but great speech." And in that, he really epitomized what we're all about at the Oxford Union, celebrating free speech and, giving everyone a chance. And even if you vehemently disagree with their argument, respecting their right to have it. So I thank him for that. And I hope that maybe, it may be a high bar, but I hope that maybe he can believe at least a word of what I'm about to say. So I interpreted this motion a little differently than my friend Isra over there, who's rolling his eyes already. But my interpretation of the American dream is that it means something different to everyone, right? So that's absolutely fine. The whole point of the American dream is that everyone who has it is able to fulfill their potential, is able to aim and achieve whatever dream they may have as an individual. It is about individualism. There were some aspects of Isra's speech. I just came from a double tutorial on Cold War, teaching that. And so there were some aspects of Isra's speech that I could be here all night correcting. But I would just say, you identify as a citizen of the world. It really reminded me of JFK.
So fucking why don't you?
I could refute them. I'm far too pressed for time to begin. So that's tough.
Yeah,
tough luck.
No, just take my word for it that all that wasn't true, and let's move on.
Strong start.
Yeah.
Actually talking about being a citizen of the world, and he didn't necessarily start the Vietnam War. We don't know what he would have done. That's the fun of it, He sent in advisors to Vietnam. But yeah, I'll stop there. I'm not going to test you. So yes, I have the different idea of the motion. I have some issues with the motion, which I'm going to help explain later. But the first thing I want to say is that we are on a very different context than when the actual quote from this motion came about, right? The quote is from Martin Luther King. The American dream has become a nightmare. And he said it in 1967. And I probably don't need to tell you very much about how much of a different context we are in. In 1967, Martin Luther King Jr. faced incredible turmoil within the civil rights movement that he was attempting to maintain unity over. A year before his assassination, he was facing immense pressure to come out against the Vietnam War, which he did, to try and collaborate with people who are encouraging him to be more mindful of Black power, pay more attention to the Black Panther Party, for example. This is a very, very different context to where we are now. And even 2 years ago, in 2020, we saw the most diverse, intergenerational, interracial group of people protest after the murder of George Floyd. We saw that. We see that after this week, we see, I love the hashtag Rovember. We see how the midterms, how women's rights to choose has been protected in states as diverse as Michigan and Kentucky, a state most people thought, oh, maybe, it will be different from Kansas, which protected women's right to choose in the summer. But before I get into my issues with the motion tonight, it falls upon me to introduce the wonderful speakers in proposition. First, Isra, as I mentioned before, is our wonderful chief of staff. We've served 3 terms on union committee together. We're both graduate students. We're in the pit there working together. And I only wish that everyone found Isra as affable as I do. I mean, including Lord Sugar, who I think if you look on the YouTube, found Isra a little frustrating in his persistence to get his questions across. And that's what is lovable about Isra, is his persistence. I'm hoping he's got his energy out, sometimes he's a bit of a jack in the box with his point of interest and point of information. But yes, I applaud him for his persistence every time. Then we have Professor Kendall Thomas, who is a professor of law, director of Center of Study Law and Culture at Columbia, and also has research into the very timely issue of critical race theory. We then have Meagan Day, a writer, editor of the Jacobin, a socialist magazine, which again proves the point of how much context has changed. If a magazine like the Jacobin had been around the decade before in the 1950s and Martin Luther King in this quote, there's no way she or others working at the magazine would have achieved the same success they have. She has also written a book entitled Bigger Than Bernie, How We Go from the Sanders Campaign to Democratic Socialism. Finally, but last but not least, we have Professor Randall Kennedy, another professor of law from the Cambridge across the pond, Harvard, and he is also on the board of the National Coalition Against Censorship. Mr. President, these are your speakers, and they are most welcome. So, my issues with this motion. When I first thought about it, I thought,
you know what? Before she goes on to do the substance of her presentation, I do just want to take a moment on this. Were you following the relevant disanalogies between 1967 and now that are supposed to show that Martin Luther King wouldn't have said that about 2023?
Yeah, an unbelievable remark for some nice liberal to make. I'm kind of surprised that they would go that far. I mean, you think liberals would be chastened enough by Trump to not be talking about how great things are these days. You think that alone, but it's like abortion was just defended in Kentucky, Ben. So it's good. I mean, yes, that's because it's now not legal nationally, and a third of the states have already banned it, and another quarter are waiting for the courts to okay their bans. That's, it was protected in a number of states, like 2 states. It was protected in 2 states, Ben. So that's really good right there. That's progress.
I mean,
and then right.
I mean, I share her happiness that abortion rights are popular, but
it's popular.
Yeah,
this is America. That doesn't matter. This is the United States. Medicare for all is popular. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's true too.
I will say I will give this woman credit before we let her really embarrass herself here. It's bold of a liberal to just even refer to Martin Luther King saying the American dream has become a nightmare. Like usually they won't. They want to make it just about the identity groups and say so now we have transgender appreciation in some parts of the country. So that's improvement. Like it's like nonstop black people getting killed by cops then and now. Like that didn't what the hell? That didn't go away. The Supreme Court overturned half the Voting Rights Act. Like we're losing ground even just on this liberal policy, the classic liberal achievements. Like this is an amazing thing for a liberal to say. I will
also say, I mean, 1967 was at, even though obviously the dark side of the Johnson administration was the war in Vietnam, which I'm sure is a big part of the context of what Dr. King is talking about in that quote. But yes, as has been extensively discussed earlier, that is not without its analogies in more recent years. But also, if you want to do a comparison of 1967 to today, I mean, 1967 was this is near the high watermark of Great Society optimism. This is, a lot of the anti-poverty programs that had been instituted then were literally in the next administration under Nixon were scrapped. And have not been brought back since then, So, we just got in Medicare, we just got civil rights, voting rights. This is the sort of basic premise that government action can help people to alleviate social misery is something that that Democrats felt the need to spend a lot of time asserting that in ways that they really have not in more recent decades.
Indeed. And this is back when, we would, break up giant monopolists, which we do not do now. I mean, now we're trying on Google. It's too late. Like, make them give up DoubleClick. That was 15 years ago. It's too late, FTC. Not really a leg to stand on here, but perhaps we're rushing to judgment, Ben.
Last point before we restart. You couldn't have had your Jacobin magazine in 1967. Really?
What's it?
Why not? I mean, Michael Harrington wrote like a bestseller in this period. Are you sure?
Yeah, it's a much more thriving small press scene back then. My God, that's like the golden era for zines and shit. Is that epoch? I do like that. I'll say this. I like that she calls it the Jacobin. I'm going to start saying that. I think I like that. So there's one.
Yeah, the one that I see. I mean, look, I suppose if we're going to be historically, if we're going to be accurate to the source material, we should all be saying, Jacobin or some, like snooty shit like that. But yes, it does. Anything but the classic Jacobin always does sound funny to me.
Yeah.
All right, let's see the rest of her presentation.
This is going to be a tough sell to this particular audience. But the more I thought about it, the more I had problems with it. What are the implications of saying that the American dream has become a global nightmare? We could debate all night long whether the American dream is a myth. We could get into debates over meritocracy. Is it actually idealistic? Is it realistic? We could go on and on about that. But we cannot deny its existence. And what does it say? If you vote out that door in favor of proposition, what does it say to the people who do have that American dream? Why is it that thousands of people attempt to come to the US every single year? Well, I hope you'll indulge me here because we're very privileged at the Oxford Union to have some amazing speakers who are top of their fields. Not always do their motions that we have fit exactly with things that they're personally passionate about. But this comes from the heart, what I'm about to say, so I hope you'll indulge me. So my dream is to become a tenure professor. And I want to enter the male-dominated world of academia as one of the few handful of female presidential historians in the world. And the reason you may ask, you're at Oxford, you're doing teaching tutorials. Why would you possibly? Why would you want to go anywhere else? To be honest with you, I started teaching when I was at the University of Mississippi doing my first doctorate in US history. And I love the freedom of the American system. Yes, I'm using the word freedom. I love the freedom to be able to incorporate my own research specialism into my teaching, to share my passion with my students. I love to be able to look down an attendance register and be able to explain exactly why each student got each grade and be able to incorporate assignments that gives each student the ability to achieve their potential. Diverse assignments, whether that's essays, papers, exams, just to be able to do that. It is a very different system than the one here in the UK that's obviously based in Oxford and Cambridge as well. Most of the people in this room will have gone through GCSEs, A-levels. I'm old enough to have gone through AS levels. I remember a time when I was able to retake a paper if I wasn't happy with it, and the best mark go forward. Just like in the US, for SATs, for APs, you're given that chance. And education is the most fundamental way to begin your progress to what you want to attain, right? No, it's right. My turn now. See, I told you. I still like you, so it's okay. So this is the thing about the difference in education. Something that I'm sure keeps you up at night, and I hope it doesn't too much, is the fact that if you're an undergraduate here at Oxford, the weekly essays that you work on so hard, that you deliberate and blood, sweat, and tears over, they count for nothing. All that counts is one day, one exam day, and that will determine your degree, your 3 years of work. How is that fair? How is that fair? For me, that is an undue welfare burden. It's hard on mental health. And I think there could be a better system. I think the US does have a better system. Not only that, I'm speaking as a neurodiverse woman. When I was an undergraduate in the UK, I didn't get the support that I needed in order to achieve my potential. It was incredibly frustrating. When I did my year abroad in the US, I had a private cubicle devoid of any sensory distractions. I had time and a half. I was able to get the grades that I knew that I could achieve all along. And I think these are things that we can learn from the US in order to ensure that everyone is able to achieve their potential. This goes into my point about the reality of alternatives. Are we really the ones to judge right now? I mean, look at where we are. We're on the third prime minister of an entire year, and the economy, is a mess. I don't know if anyone here feels good about where we are politically, economically. If you do, I'm going to say that you've already headed to the bar. I think that this is going to be, I'm not sure that we're in a position where we can really cross stones. The fact that we have such similar problems as the US. We have a shared culture. We've got shared issues. We can't be blind to this. Which leads me on to my final point. I am sure that the proposition tonight is going to make some incredibly important points, as they already have, about inequality, especially to do with race and gender. This is not confined to the US, though. And I want you to remember that the people making these points are at the top of their fields. I'm sure that they have surmounted all kinds of obstacles to get to where they are. But they are still proof that the American dream does exist. Thank you very much.
I just got to say here, listening to the last part of that, might be a little unfair of me, but I kept thinking about this classic ad. You've probably seen this before.
Not tragically colored. There is no sorrow. When I was 17, I quoted Zora Neale Hurston's How It Feels to Be Colored Me in my college application essay. The line that spoke to me stated simply, I am not tragically colored. There is no sorrow dammed up in my soul nor lurking behind my eyes. I do not mind at all. At 17, I had no idea what life would bring, but Zora's sentiment
Well, all right. It's being slow, but this is
a mercy. It's a mercy, I think.
The CIA recruited ad where she says, "I'm a cisgender millennial with generalized anxiety disorder," while she's talking about literally working in the fucking CIA. Although there is one that's not even my favorite part of it. My favorite part is when she. She mentions that she speaks Spanish, which I think is being brought up for diversity points. But I will say it would be very useful if you work for the CIA.
Oh yeah, they love that. That's like the best thing you can have is some fluency and some stuff. Then we'll really make people neurodivergent by blowing their arms off and shit. They'll be really neurodivergent. Their nerves will like physically diverge from each other. That is what we'll do. Yeah, that's about like the darkest shit in the universe, But I mean, hell, they've been appropriating Martin Luther King to claim he'd be conservative since the 90s. I mean, that was Newt Gingrich's catchphrase. Like these people, they do not understand shame, And this woman, I mean, our debater just now, I mean, she's look, everything she said was like the laziest, most self-serving lies you can imagine. But finished strong. She finished strong. Why? Her last point. Who are Brits to judge? Which is like the best point I ever heard a British person ever make. Like that should have been, she should have stood up and said that and sat back down and it would have been a 10 out of 10. Like that would have been perfect.
If she just said, Britain sucks so bad that we really can't judge anybody. And that had been the whole of her statement, then I guess I might have actually had to give it to.
A century ago, we controlled a quarter of the earth. Now, complete laughingstock. And then, and then she then she should have like mooned the crowd and farted and sat down. Like that would have been an appropriate, I feel, conclusion to that. I mean, everything else is disgraceful, and it's very brave for a white woman to get into a field like academia. Like that's just so incredibly brave.
Oh yeah. Well, like notice how thin you have to slice it. That she's going to be one of the few female presidential historians. Well, there's also like Doris fucking Kearns Goodwin. I mean, like you're not exactly the Jackie Robinson of this, but in any case, yeah, that's so weird. Like, so I mean, there's so little substance here. That like it's almost hard to even pick apart. But I mean, she like is like literally like she's so all over the place that she spends, like, she's actually, she's like, she wasted like minutes of this presentation talking about how she likes the grading system better at American universities than British ones. Like, okay.
Yeah. And our higher ed system's really fucked up in all kinds of unique ways, though. Like the fact that it doesn't have your unique, hyper punitive, colonial, like exam eugenic culling moment. I mean, yes, that's good, but like I don't incorporate my research into
but also like how many people are still paying off going to college decades ago.
Yeah. Like I'm not aware that that's a huge economic burden in Britain. The student loan debt there. I think that they're at least that much more civilized than us. So
yeah. Also, I don't even understand why comparison to Britain is the way that this is being evaluated. It's like the American, like it's no longer true, or either King was wrong to say it in the first place, or it's like not, or it's not true anymore, that the American dream is a global nightmare because, like, in certain respects, it's better to be in the United States than it is to be in one of its like closest allies and vassal states.
Yeah, I mean, all these countries have their own like fucked up, unique things, though. It's like you say, you go to Canada and you get health insurance, which is an incredible thing, but like they fucking like British-ish libel laws. Their government, technically has to get the approval of the Queen, and it occasionally matters. It's like every country has like horrible, they're all dumb, different beasts. I don't know. Our higher ed system, man. I mean, I don't incorporate my research into my teaching like she's so excited about, because I'm on the left and I work in a business program, and I'm scared if I talk too much smack in the class, I'll get someone in the Chamber of Commerce complaining to the administration who controls my actual job, and they'll, I'm tenured, but they can eliminate a position that you're tenured for. Like, you could be gotten rid of. I don't know, but if you have nice opinions like her that would never offend anyone powerful, that would never even arise, even though she's neurodivergent, which is at least as important.
Yeah. That's such a weird, like, I mean, just like going through, like, if you actually like try to think back to that statement as a whole, it's like, okay, that 12 minutes you just heard of just the prosecutorial litany of all of the evil shit that the American global military hegemon is doing, is it like stamps around the world like Godzilla in Tokyo. I could refute all that if I felt like it, but who has the time?
She had the time. It's like minute after minute on higher ed, which obviously God preserve, but it's like I could refute it, and yet I'm going to go on suspiciously long about an unrelated issue. I invite you to take that. Take it at face value, everyone, please.
Yeah.
Funny side issue here, real fast, Ben. A number of people in the comments are pointing out that you look like, I feel it's like you have kind of a ghostly presence here. That your photo effect is kind of.
It is kind of like at this point. It's interesting. So I've been doing the like green screen and artificial background thing on a few different programs, and on StreamYard, which is what we're using now. It's not nearly as good as Zoom. Like I don't maintain as much coherence in this, so it's like I look a little bit like, if you remember in Back to the Future, when
yes,
Marty McFly is like, every time he does something in the past that drives his parents further apart, he has that family photo he keeps with him.
Yeah, wow, Ben. Yeah, I'm worried. You're disappearing. I hate to say this, Ben, but I feel like we have to help your parents fuck. This is you're disappearing. Ben, we gotta. You're disappearing. I'm sorry, but I was good. Yeah, that's good. I was going to say you look like kind of like an apparition. Like I'm having like a vision. I had a vision of Ben Burgess, like you have a vision of the Virgin Mary.
Sure. People are always saying me in tortillas also.
Yeah. Ben Burgess appeared to me, and he had a message, like you're the patron saint of like shabby debate techniques.
Yeah. But yes, I do think that she did have time. She could have shaved some of the minutes of musing about her personal career ambitions and her neurodivergence and the fine-grained differences between how grading works in the US and the UK to perhaps refute some of those claims about Iraq and Afghanistan and Yemen.
Yeah, those were like not cute little points. It was like war crime after ethnic cleansing after international criminal court referral. And it's like, oh, America, isn't it fun when you hear American rock song and cheeseburgers? So anyway, what I want to do is to become a college provost and decide exactly what the curriculum will be.
Yeah.
It's like suspiciously discursive considering how incredibly serious and extensive the previous speaker's charges were. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. I love this guy. Yeah, that's so great. Anyway, I don't know. I'm just going to filibuster for 12 minutes.
God, and I don't know. Like, I'm of two minds about, like, the nice bonhomie stuff. Like, I come from the sciences, and you're really supposed to, if you're disrespectful in a professional debate there, it's, like, reflects badly on you.
Sure.
But none of these people are scientists. They're shitty social science people, and they're full of shit, and they make me mad. So it tends to make me angry at them and make me annoyed at their cute bonhomie. But then I relax, and I see my beautiful cat. And there
you go. That's a very nice looking cat. I like it. All right, let's watch for a little palate cleanser. Let's watch Professor Kendall Thomas for who is the next speaker.
Ooh.
Let me begin by thanking the President and members of the Oxford Union for your kind invitation. A few days ago, I watched a YouTube clip of the singer James Blunt serenading this house. I'm no James Blunt, but for reasons I'll make clear shortly, I'd like to frame the case I want to make for tonight's proposition with a song. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the Pilgrim's pride, from every mountain side, let freedom ring.
I mean, I'm of two minds here. That is a weird thing to do in a debate, but also, this guy is a unfathomably better singer than I am. So much like British people try to judge another country, who am I to say?
Oh my God, that opening decision, open by singing the song that you're forced to sing as a child in the United States. We've passed beyond, in my view, the mega cringe territory and well into the giga cringe levels.
Yeah.
Levels difficult for scientists to measure.
Yeah. I mean, I suspect that he's setting up, but actually, it's not living up to these ideals kind of point, given the way that they're ordering the speakers here. But regardless of where he's going, just like I said, odd choice, but he is a good singer. So
bold choice.
Let's go on.
So, my first threshold point is a performative one, and it's quite personal indeed. You've just listened to the first stanza of the patriotic hymn, America, better known as My Country, 'Tis of Thee. I like this song, and I like singing it. It's a song that every American of my generation, I'm 65, learned as a young school child, along with multiplication tables and the Pledge of Allegiance. Like Professor Kennedy, I was born during the turbulent years of the Civil Rights Movement. I was one of the little children whose future Martin Luther King dreamed about in his celebrated oration at the 1963 March on Washington, I Have a Dream. Those of you who know that speech will remember that the incantation with which it ends, "Let freedom ring," is a line from My Country 'Tis of Thee. Aretha Franklin sang the song in 2009 at Barack Obama's historic first presidential inauguration ceremony. And President Obama used the lines of the hymn, "The Words of Thee I Sing," as the title for a 2010 children's book that he dedicated to his daughters. It's my personal American dream song. I imagine, though, that many of you heard yourselves silently singing the melody along with me, subconsciously, but with entirely different lyrics. My Country 'Tis of Thee is what musicologists call a contrafactum, a composition that substitutes one set of lyrics for another without changing the music. Etymologically, the term derives from the Latin contrafacere, to counterfeit, which is a compound of the words contra, against, and facere, to make do. My Country 'Tis of Thee is an American ode to democratic freedom and popular sovereignty. God Save the King, which is what some of you heard, is a British anthem to the sovereign majesty of monarchical dominion. Both lyrics give voice to dreams of the imagined community, to use Benedict Anderson's phrase, that we call the nation. Now, some of you may have experienced the unfamiliar pairing of words and music as an acoustic disorientation, a dissonance that was not
as reluctant as I am to pause for very long, because we still haven't gotten to the point yet, and I am eager to get there. I will just say, as much as this guy has a lovely singing voice, I do find this kind of amazing, because like every time I do a debate where they're like, you know, only have so long for your opening statement or whatever, even when I'm, like I'm one of only two people doing it, so like my opening statement isn't the whole thing. I get to come back and speak again later. Like I spent all this time worried about how I'm going to get everything I want to say into that 10 minutes. And man, I've got to say, out of the three speakers we've seen so far, only one of them seemed to approach it that way.
These people talk like they've got 3 hours. This is like incredible. All the commenters you've been putting up are very funny and they're making me laugh. It's just like 10 minutes in front of like Oxford Union. It seems like you would think it's a big deal. Maybe these people came from America to do this. And it's just like, we are just moseying on to the point and we'll get there when we get there. Oxford Unions, they got their schedule and I got mine. So I'm just going to.
Exactly.
In a way, I admire them. These people, will say this. These people are not like sweating under the gun. These people are not like packing in too much material. The only person who like used their time seriously was the guy tearing down the United States. In a way, I love this debate. The only effective presenter was the guy trashing the terrible American record. Everyone else is a flaccid point maker at best. I mean, this. We'll see what the rest of this looks like.
We'll see where he eventually goes.
Take it out. We are not exactly rocketing off the blocks. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I expect there is some criticism coming at some point here, but like again, we are 4 minutes and 27 seconds into a 12-minute and 56-second video of his presentation. So anytime now, dude.
I think they all thought they had more time. I think they all prepared for.
Yeah, did they tell everybody they had 2 hours and it was like, and nobody paid attention? Like everybody assumed that like, oh, well, I'm the one who gets 2 hours. Everybody else only got the 12 minutes.
I will do these people a service. And I will say this could be the most critical thing I'll say about the debate so far is like these people, I feel like there must have been a mistake, which is not great. It didn't go well when people were like, well, maybe there was an error, We'll see.
Yeah, no, Oliver, I'm joking. I know that I know they know how much time they get, but the point is that they're very much acting as if they do not know it. So in any case, let's continue onward.
Just cognitive, but corporeal. Not just intellectual, but emotional. Something you felt in your body, as though your ears were deceiving you, to use the familiar figure of speech. If you did, you've experienced something of what I feel every time I sing My Country 'Tis of Thee. The dissonance I speak of, however, is not what you just felt, but something different. It involves the almost out-of-body distance I feel from my Americanness as a global citizen who is a proud member of the African diaspora when I sing this song. The feeling that comes from knowing that as much as I love to sing it, the words of the song you're singing, Kendall, about the fathers who've died and the pilgrim's pride, and even the thee, were not written with you or your America in mind. Try as I might, I can never quite shake the sense that when I'm singing it, I'm singing somebody else's song. But I have learned or been taught to like the song. I told you, it's my dream song. So I set my ambivalence about the lyrics aside and sing the contrafactum, which is riven with contradictions, that we call My Country 'Tis of Thee. This same mix of alienation and attraction also describes how I feel about the contrafactum we call the American dream. That complex of symbols, of stories, of myths, of images, of songs that suture not just American citizens, but citizens all over the globe to the idea of America. So I want to move the case in favor of the proposition with another personal observation about the dream that explains why we find it so hard to silence, or at least to stop listening to its siren song, knowing as we do that the American dream, the song of America, has become an ideological weapon of death, as we've heard, not just in the United States, but all around the globe. The first is that there is no such thing as the American dream. I beg to differ. While the American dream may have become a global nightmare, its nightmare is one that the world doesn't seem quite ready to shake. Both in the US and around the world, the power and puzzling persistence of the dream stem precisely from the success with which the makers of the dream have continually marshaled the ideological arsenal that Umberto Eco calls the power of the fake. There is no American dream. So what does it mean to say that there's no American dream? This claim can be understood in at least one of two ways. First is as an argument about the assumed singularity implicit in the definite article, the American dream. There is no such thing as the American dream. It's an individual matter which penetrates the unconscious of everyone who claims it. It's the second more radical understanding of the claim, though, that I want to defend here, namely that the American dream simply does not exist. The ideological roots of the dream run deep in our national history, but many people are surprised to learn that the concept itself is not even a century old. The first recorded appearance of the phrase only dates back to James Truslow Adams' 1931 book, The Epic of America, in which he argues that the American dream is a dream of a land in which life should be better and richer and fuller for everyone, with opportunity for each according to ability or achievement. If we accept this definition of the dream, the one thing that can be said about it without fear of contradiction is that it is manifestly a fiction, a fantastication, a lie that has not ever truly existed in all its fullness. It is, in other words, an impossible dream. This is especially true today when the we of Adams' social democratic narrative has given way to the me of neoliberal capitalism with its toxic mix of market fundamentalism and libertarian individualism. The US is now the most unequal society in the developed world. Inequality in the US is approaching levels last seen in the years leading up to the Great Depression of the 1930s. Now, one of the central themes of the dream historically has been its promise of social mobility. But as the economist Raj Chetty notes, the chance of ending up today where you start in America has gone up. Where you start in America has gone up, while the chance of moving up has gone down. As the pandemic has wound down, the American press has been filled with articles with wistful titles such as "The American Dream of the Middle Class is Not What It Used to Be," obituaries for the American dream. In short, the US today has far less mobility and equal opportunity than the EU or other OECD countries. In fact, the US is 27th on the global social mobility index of the World Economic Forum, just above Spain and behind Lithuania.
See, this is all interesting stuff. We couldn't have done 10 minutes of this.
Yeah, it was really this.
You're just gonna wedge this into the last.
This car had a big airbag. It was. Yeah, I don't know why he backfilled all the interesting shit here. They're dinging the bells on him, and he's just getting to like the juicy shit. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, we could have skipped the song, the music history lesson, the ruminations on the history of the phrase "the American dream," and this stuff that you're trying to wedge into the last 3 or 4 minutes. Like, you could have actually just given us 12 minutes of that.
Yeah, and all this, like, it would, yeah, it's the dream, it's a lie. It never existed in all its fullness. Like, it's so smushy. And then suddenly neoliberalism and inequality and most unequal economy and incredibly cruel. Like, this is just, he buried the lead. That's what they call that. He buried the lead, this gentleman.
Yes, exactly.
Too much operatic ambition and not enough get to the point. So I got to say, the commenters in here tonight are just cooking this guy, and I've been laughing pretty hard at the comments. You guys are killing me. But it's, there was something good in this. It's all about the range of bizarre choices people make when they do debates, I guess. That's the lesson.
Fair enough.
And so the question for me becomes, what explains the enduring power of the dream globally? Since we know that by any objective measure, the American dream no longer exists. We may say that it is dead even. The thing about dreams, though, is that they create their own reality. And this is the feature of the American dream that I want to suggest makes the proposition before the floor somewhat beside the point, even though I'm arguing it. It doesn't matter if the American dream is not real. It doesn't matter even that it has become a nightmare, domestically as well as globally. We now live in the world described by the unnamed official in the George Bush administration in a now notorious article that appeared in the New York Times Magazine in the fall of 2004. The author of that piece, Ron Susskind, quoted some words from his interview that, by way of a conclusion, I'd like to paraphrase before I sit down. This Bush administration official said this: "This is the dream today. We're an empire now, and when we act, we create reality. And while you're studying or debating the reality of whether the American dream has indeed become a global nightmare, or whether it's even real or true, we'll act again, creating other new realities. The American dream has indeed become a global nightmare. Long live that American dream." Thank you.
So, like a pithy summary of the last 12 minutes would be, I don't know, man, it's complicated.
I don't know. It's so inconclusive and like willing to, kind of bring out classic criticisms of the economy, like nothing specific. I mean, most unequal out of the OECD was like the most concrete this got. I don't know. It's a strange one. And yeah, I don't know. Everyone's got pretty good gags in the comments. So I don't know.
I mean, I literally don't know.
Neoliberalism, like it's in the back. Who knows what neoliberalism is? Like it's just so. One of the commenters said, "This is what happens when you let a law professor rather than a lawyer do the public statement," which I thought was pretty funny. Maybe that gets.
I mean, it's kind of. I mean, literally, it felt like it could have. I mean, it's like the in conclusion, the American dream is a land of contrasts, right? I mean, like is.
Every time, very funny.
Because like seriously, like what are you saying? Like there was that minute where he got really interested, and he was talking about neoliberalism and he was citing economic statistics. It's like, man, I wanted to hear more about that. But then like it just got like literally the flow of that statement. I mean, give him credit where credit's due. He has a good singing voice, and he's a very and he has a good rhythm as a speaker, right? His good presentation. But like far as I can tell, the flow of that presentation was singing, music history, reflections, like some fun facts about the history of the phrase American Dream.
Indictments mixed with cliche. That was kind of the
indictments mixed with cliche, and then some like it just sort of floated away on this cloud of like, perhaps there isn't an American dream, but perhaps that means there really is. And,
but there really isn't. But it's good that it's bad, or is it? Thank you very much. Like just completely. Another commenter has it right. Should have ended with the song. Like it was top heavy on the on the toe tapper. It reminds me of a song, and you finish with an up tempo one.
Yeah, I mean, God, at least if he'd finished with the song instead of being, I mean, I still would have been like, "What the fuck are you doing?" But like, I have but like, at least it would have been fun, right?
Yeah, really, just if someone had bumped into him and just reversed his papers so he did it all backwards, it wouldn't have been so weird. Finishing on a song, I mean, that's odd, but you've done all this presentation by then.
It's an odd choice, but at least you'd be finishing at something we'd be enjoying instead of.
And all the meatier stuff, such as it was, would be in the front half that people listen to. I mean, it's losing people, and you could see it visually. I love the guy to the right of the president on the left of the screen, who obviously does not realize that he's in the shot of the speakers and is both scrolling and texting with something resting on his groin. Who knows? But again, when you sing and then are boring, you're gonna lose the crowd. They're gonna scroll. They're gonna scroll dates. They're gonna scroll posts.
Like Plano Shrimp's suggestion that he could have started and finished that song. So he could have finished. He could have just sung something else for us at the end. Maybe we didn't start the fire.
That's a good one.
Which would have fit the themes of his speech as far as I followed it.
Yes, I think his rich baritone singing voice would be better suited to Leonard Cohen's "Democracy is Coming to the USA," and that would be a long, slow song to sing in its entirety.
Oh, you could just fill up the whole segment.
You gotta do the whole bits. Like you gotta do the whole thing.
Yeah, no, you could do, and like, that's there you go. I mean, you don't even have to give a speech at all. I mean, it could just be that song, and it'd be like, okay, that was like a pleasant musical interlude.
Again, we've learned a lot. I feel like every time I come on your program, Ben, I learn more about debates. I learn like the Buckley techniques. Don't let the other side talk. Control the show. Stop them from talking with technology. Like that's a good one. This is another good one. If you don't really want to say a bunch of potentially career compromising critical remarks about the country you live in, even though you're invited overseas to do so, give a weird, baffling non-debate where it includes critical words but mixed in with incomprehensible remarks. And next, sing a song. If you're really desperate. I don't know. This is all well and good, Ben, but frankly, what all this has left me with an appetite for is for a fucking intense, fun socialist writer like a Meagan Day to stride out with a long, clean blade and lop off all the heads of these Game of Thrones backup characters.
Well, we do have one more Game of Thrones backup character before Meagan.
It's all part of the build.
And do you know, I don't know how much you were tracking what they said earlier, because the first two speakers both talked a little bit about who was coming up on the other side from them. So do you know who the one speaker we've got before Meagan is?
No.
Massachusetts is Scott Brown.
Single-term Senator S. Brown, darling of the Republicans for stealing a Senate seat from the laziest Clinton-like campaign from that Massachusetts useless, what's her name? Lost to history, deservedly so. Scott Brown. I regret knowing who he is. And now I regret telling all these innocent people. Oh, thanks for that.
Yeah. So I think Meagan technically has me beat. The highest ranking U.S. politician I've ever debated is Tulsi Gabbard. Who's no longer in the House by the time I debated her, but Scott Brown was no longer in the Senate by the time Meagan.
Hey, they're all formers. Yeah.
Yeah, I will. I mean, it is funny. I suspect Scott Brown will at least say more than Tulsi did. Like Tulsi was sort of at a debate that I was at. She didn't contribute much.
Wouldn't have struck me as the type to anyway. Well, Scott Brown, this guy was able to hustle his way into a, Democrat Senate seat. So I assume he has some hustle. I bet you he brings more fire to his dumb love of capitalism than McCarthy's staff did to their boring, reheated socialist condemnation. Like this, I have higher expectations for.
Yeah, exactly.
For dumb right.
I think that's fair, Silver. I debated near Tulsi. She was on stage, but I don't know what she was really debated.
Wow.
Which makes sense, right? Because if she'd been and it is, I mean, it's funny and frustrating. I had, that was the one with me and her and Tim Pool, James O'Keefe, and they
got the brain trust out for you, did they? That's
yeah. Good. I was promised a second leftist, and then they were like, "Oh, how do you feel about Tulsi Gabbard as fourth debater?" I was like, "Well, I wouldn't feel very good about it."
She's a conservative now. Why would I like that? You idiots, fucking dummies.
And then I tried very hard to get them to add Sam Cedar to it, which they seemed to be initially interested in. And depending on which account you find more plausible, there is the official narrative that the legal department said it was too late to update the contracts by adding Tim. That was what they said. Which I don't know. I kind of think they could have pulled an all-nighter and copied and pasted a contract into a new Word file, but who knows? But that, or you could believe Sam's own speculation, which is that Tim Pool was like, "No, I'm not talking to that guy again." But
there's a long record of right wingers running away from talking to Sam Cedar. Like that's, he's such a sweet guy. It's such a nice, calming voice, and he just these guys will dive behind any flimsy excuse to not talk to him. So, man's got something.
I mean, and what the debate ended up mostly being about was, these guys all claim that they're all about free speech, and my contention is that if any of them cared at all about the free speech of the majority of Americans, they would be trying to make it easier to organize labor unions rather than the opposite, because we live in a free enough society that unless you're Edward Snowden, you're not really worried about being imprisoned for your beliefs. What you are maybe worried about is that if your beliefs piss off your boss, you're going to get fired. Mm-hmm. And so it makes perfect sense to me that I was sort of debating near Tulsi on that one, because if she had agreed with me about the labor stuff, she would be pissing off her new friends at Fox News. But if she had agreed with James and Tim, then she's taking on board a bunch of positions, she's putting herself on record, right, as taking these anti-union positions. And what good is that going to do her? So
yeah, there's no upside if you're mainly thinking about it from a careerist perspective rather than having a particle of intellectual integrity.
yeah,
And
exactly.
this media, these people are here for careers,
Yeah, just say aloha and make a couple of charming personal comments and leave it the fuck at that.
If you're really desperate, sing a song. That's
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
In case of emergency, sing a children's song. I've learned every time I come on the show, I learn a lot about debates. I'm never going to lose a debate again after all this knowledge I have.
Yeah, no, push comes like someday, you're going to be debating some libertarian economists, and it's like, interesting point.
God.
My country tis of thee.
I think I would go with a Cole Porter medley up my sleeve. I don't want that. That song's boring. I want a good one.
Fair enough.
All right, let's I'm not scared of some senator. Fucking let's do it.
Yeah, fair enough. Last comment before we go to former Senator Scott Brown, our Massachusetts. Both the confusing last debater and the kind of vapid, some might say, one before him, were in the substantive parts of their remarks. They were talking a lot about upward mobility, basically, right? Like this is, I remember the one before him said, she talked about education as like the most important thing. And it's true that there are ways in which equal opportunity isn't always as good as it should be, especially when it comes to race and gender, which is, by the way, a super duper revealing lib comment because okay, what you're telling me is you don't actually object to poverty and economic hierarchy. You just want the top rungs of that hierarchy to have the demographically correct proportions of every group in them. That we need a ruling class that's half female and has the right precise proportions of Black and brown people and et cetera, et cetera. However many however many differently abled trans Goldman Sachs CEOs need to be ruling over us, that'll get it done. And then the singing speaker just now said he was in the part where he remembered that he was supposed to be arguing for the resolution. He was talking about the absence of upward mobility. And I've got to say, when we're thinking about the most fundamental things that are wrong about inequality, all this upward mobility stuff always strikes me as largely beside the point because, by definition, maybe not by definition, but by definition plus some pretty safe mathematical assumptions, you are no matter how easy or hard it is, the vast majority of people within any class society are not going to be upwardly mobile. Most of the jobs in any economy are going to be at the bottom. So if you're only concerned with upward mobility, that does always read to me as you're just writing off the majority of the population as not really relevant to your concerns about justice.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's always, it's like Obama's education program. It's race to the top, like everyone to race to the top. Like someone won't be on the top. Someone has to clean the trash cans for the guy at the top. And they need a social fucking safety net and they need health insurance. It's just such, it's so flimsy. I don't know. I think this is why some of these debaters come up and just have feel good points and nice songs and so on. Anything to avoid engaging with the reality that the new head of the Democratic Party, it's amazing that he's Black. It's less delightful that he's just sliding down a giant pile of coins. All of these things are issues, and you can't just ignore the one that is bad for your career to mention.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Having girded ourselves as best we can, let's do Scott Brown.
Brown's in town.
Brown's in town, exactly.
Mr. President, honorable opposition members, honored guests, welcome. It's fascinating being here and listening to people from my own country criticizing it so much. Many of you know me. I'm a former U.S. Senator.
Two quick comments just at the top of the presentation. I love, it's like, oh, I see you're criticizing America, but did you not yourself grow up in America? Like that's a very strong argument.
Got him.
Got
him.
Nailed him.
I just say, of course, like the liberals are, it's just the smushiest, you singing, literally burning time to sing songs. But of course, now it's the conservative. So he's 9 foot tall and handsome. He strides up and goes, every one of you is a fucking traitor. Like this, what do you know? The conservative isn't going to just say a bunch of mushy garbage. He's going to have the courage of his satanic convictions and come out there, and every man is going to be like, well, now I'm hard again. Okay, we're getting somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, it would be almost as if, Alexander Solzhenitsyn grew up in the Soviet Union and wrote the Gulag Archipelago on a typewriter that was manufactured in a nationalized factory.
Ooh. Yeah.
But
it's not impressive.
Second observation, your career is going great when you have to remind people that you used to be a senator.
A former U.S. senator, and now I save my tuxedo and ties for niche invitations like these.
Yeah, that's Scott Brown. Hey, I used to be a senator.
That's now I'm just a super rich shady guy. Yeah. So he's got humility.
As I recall, the first speaker said who he was and already told these nice people that he was a senator. But he just wanted to make sure that nobody missed them. But anyway, moving on.
Yeah, fire and brimstone.
Representing our country in New Zealand, Cook, Niue, Samoa, our interest in Antarctica. It was a great honor to serve my country. I'm going to use a quote for somebody that I don't agree with a lot, but I have a tremendous amount of respect for, and that's President Joe Biden. And he said, and I quote, "Don't compare us to the Almighty, compare us to the alternatives." Now, I'm not sure if the proposition heard that quote or even cares to remember it, but what I've heard just now is the typical America bad spiel. Oh yeah, bad, everything's bad, everything's terrible, Israel. Oh my God. You went to school in the United States though. So I guess you spent some time there and you went to school, so you're probably part of that. And facts matter. We had our dinner upstairs, and the opposition first speaker pointed out your inaccuracies. And with regard to my running, yes, I've run 21 times. I'm 19-2. I'll take those odds any day. Listen, what you don't hear, though, from the proposition speakers is, what is the alternative? What does the alternative actually look like? Well, you can look at China, you can look at Russia, you can look at Afghanistan, Iran. What does it look like there? A lower standard of living. Free speech, what is it? If you're in China and you're a Uyghur, you're in a reconditioning concentration camp.
So just to make sure that I'm getting this right, the United States, Russia, China, Afghanistan, he just listed off all the countries, right?
Yeah, I cannot think of any countries that any leftist would ever favorably refer to as policy models. It's true. Like when people say, "Why are you socialist?" I go, "Look at Afghanistan."
Yeah, no, exactly.
And they go, "Wow."
That's obviously better. They have.
There's making up a straw man, and then there's just being dumb. This guy's dumb.
I mean, fair enough. Look, first I thought that what's the alternative meant like, you don't like it when we cluster bomb, invade, and occupy other countries and spend decades trying to impose governments on them against the will of the population and starve people with sanctions. But what's the alternative? Just like not doing that? I mean, come on, be serious.
Yeah. Would you rather live in Afghanistan? Which would you want, kid I hit, to live in this house with me where I hit you, or in that house I burned down a year ago?
Yeah, exactly.
Think about it. Think about it while I hit you. That's, this is a good dad. Yeah, I don't know. Typical America, bad, bad, bad. Well, I love that kind of moment. Like, oh, you have a list of things I did that's bad. Oh, America, bad, bad, bad. Yeah, it was a long list, wasn't it? You're right. It was like that.
Oh my God, you're right. I hit my kid. I burned down my neighbor's house. We've heard it all before. God.
Yeah. I heard it all before when it was listed by the judge because I commit a lot of crimes.
Yeah, exactly. We already went over this in the prosecutor's statement. Jesus, do we have to hear it again when you're sentencing me?
Yeah, I don't know if this guy's going to convince the people who were convinced by the first speaker.
Yeah.
Like a list of things. This guy throws in facts matter, and then it's like generalizations, facts matter, generalizations. Like there are no facts in the story except that Uyghurs are in concentration camps in China, which is accurate. But I mean,
yeah, well, it is accurate, but also
advocate for that,
Also, like, okay, so it turns out the actual argument he's making, it's not the one that was attributed to him. It's, well, look, hey, you, first speaker, you studied in the United States. Clearly,
right away.
Yeah, you'd rather
totally dismisses any argument you made.
Yeah,
easy.
No, sure.
You don't like America? You're from there, so. Oh, you don't like Russia? You're from there, so I think you do like it.
Exactly.
I think you do like it.
Exactly. And like, okay, so it turns out the argument is that it's better to live in the United States than it is to live in any of the other 3 countries in the world, Russia, China, and Afghanistan. Like, I mean, he would have a problem here if it turns out that there was a 5th or even a 6th country in the world, and that maybe this other country, turned out to have advantages that the United States does not.
Yeah, and this is a cliche, of course, but it's like well established that when Republicans are asked to name socialist countries, it's China, Venezuela. It's usually Russia, which is just hilarious. It's like, no, like 30 years. Okay, no. But when you ask Democrats, it's Denmark and Norway and Sweden and so on. Like it's just a completely different frame of reference. Let's just ignore that and just say like everyone wants it to be Kazakhstan. Let's just keep saying that until I age into death.
Yeah, exactly. Also, like Russia, I mean, not unlike the point you were making earlier about Cambodia, the United States was not exactly an innocent bystander in the process of Russia becoming the kind of country it is today.
Yeah. Oh yeah, my God! Like back when it was all up in the air, like everything we did was to make it more corrupt and heinous and stripped down, and just demand the step in of someone like Putin, who could at least rein in the oligarchs enough to have a country.
Yeah, I mean, like Putin is literally the handpicked successor of Boris Yeltsin, who was reelected, let's say, with I think pretty openly a lot of help from the United States in 1990s.
Literal briefcases of cash, is this like actual physical ones, like on the steps of the Duma. It was like a big thing at the time.
Yeah, right. Like, and because we wanted to make sure that shock therapy that was having such nice effects in Russia didn't stop happening. Before like every like grain of mud in that country had been privatized. Like that's I mean, I'm just saying, like we kind of did that, right? I mean, like that really is another one of I mean, at the very least, right? It's like if it's not quite, oh, it's nicer to live in my house than that house across the street that I burned down. It's at the very goddamn least, it's nicer to live in my house than that house across the street that I helped to burn down.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we'll see how this goes, but I mean, so far this is just confirming our fears. Like the liberal people kind of go up, and it's smushy, and the Declaration of Independence was written in 1790, like just like very weak. And now like here comes the right winger, and he's willing to stand up, and he's got like his like nice prepared smooth spiel that anyone can understand. This is the reality. Like these people are trained to be sharks, and liberals will do anything to avoid taking public positions on these issues.
Yeah. Also, I'm glad Joe Brummer pointed this out in the comments. He also said the first speaker pointed out the inaccuracies, and she didn't.
Oh, yeah. She just said she would, but she didn't actually do it. She talked about how it's going to be great when she's a professor and failing to use her tenure for anything.
Yeah.
That was inspiring.
Yeah. I mean, like literally she didn't. She said that like, well, I could if I had time, but I've got like
Right.
5 minutes that I want to do rambling about like my own struggles and my career and like
When
my,
I'm a professor, here's how I'm going to decorate my office. The window-facing side will have like a taffeta tree.
yeah, look, if I had talked about the war in Afghanistan, that would have taken away a lot of time from my office decoration spiel. So like, just, look, just trust that I could have refuted that had I felt like it.
Indeed. And now, I'm prepared to try to focus on former Senator Brown, even though I really just want to focus on the beautiful hair of the listener.
Fair enough.
You know what's happening in Iran right now? I mean, come on. What's the alternative? To me, you can see me on Facebook later, actually. If we were in any of those countries, we wouldn't have the ability to have this conversation that we're having right here. It wouldn't be allowed. And what I see, for example, as the ambassador in the Indo-Pacific, I see what the alternatives are. I note that when we were in the Indo-Pacific and when we're dealing with issues, we're the first to respond to natural disasters. We give by far the most aid and assistance to all the island nations and many nations around the world. What does it look like specifically? Well, with China, they're very good at debt servicing islands, creating massive debts that will never, ever be repaid. That's the difference. Never, ever been repaid, and they will be in trouble for generations to come.
Man, what kind of country would do something like that?
Trouble for generations. Man, this is, I got to say, of like all the little bullshit evasions and shit that conservatives do, the Russia's pulling countries into debt service shit. I think if someone said that to me, I'd really want to just like spit in their face. Like we openly turn these countries into imperial territories, and then we enslave them to debt for 50 years of the Cold War. And now China's like, oh, I could do that with like some of the smaller ones, perhaps. Like, oh, loan sharking China. Oh my God, this
Which
is
also like, look,
no.
I have no sympathy, like whatsoever for the Chinese government, and and no interest in denying they do all kinds of really bad things. But also, if you actually like look into the details, that Belt and Road stuff, it's like, I'm not saying there's nothing to this critique, but like, I don't know, man. Like, I think if you're going to deal with a loan shark, you're probably better off with them than the fucking IMF.
Yeah. I mean, Jesus, the IMF. I mean, Pakistan's like going into a revolutionary period because the IMF won't let it, have enough food subsidies to stabilize like the food markets there. It's amazing. Hey, girl, I know it's brutal.
Yeah. I mean, just like an American politician saying that America is great because other countries, trap less developed countries in debt peonage is, there's some chutzpah there.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And we'll move on. Like, so what's the alternative? Well, we always refer to Scandinavia, but I'm sure you won't even be able to summon that. Like, it's very easy to meet us, like, even a quarter of the way here. This is, this guy's a senator, he's a conservative. He's got like a stump speech about how there is no alternative because we'll just artfully avoid referring to the countries that are pleasant alternatives. Is there any way we could possibly have a republic and a social safety net? No, it's just, no, we can. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
That's, tough to hear, isn't it, girl?
Now, you know what a real global nightmare is to me? It's what's happening in Ukraine right now with the war criminal Putin. Okay, raping, killing, murdering innocent civilians, and threatening to use nuclear weapons if he doesn't win his illegal war. That's a global nightmare. That is a global nightmare. It's funny, I spoke to my daughters today. I speak to them 34 and 32 years old, and they wish me well. I said, Dad, I can't believe you're going to defend America. And what the proposition also told you, or failed to tell you, is that we have 332 million people in our country. It's so diverse. We have different nationalities, religions, politics, economic issues, rich, poor, happy, sad, gay, straight. I mean, it doesn't matter. We are such a diverse culture. And yes, it's messy. Democracy is absolutely messy. But what's the alternative? They didn't offer any. They just want to, no, thank you, not at this time. What is the alternative? Well, I can tell you that it's not what Isra certainly pointed out. The doom and gloom, the hate, it's unbelievable. For all the things I've heard, and the proposition that the American dream is now a global nightmare, there's no way that they've reached the threshold to actually convince you of that. So when you go through that door, you have to go through the left side. You have to. Now, stats matter. My first point is the American dream is alive and well. As I said, there's 332 million people. Each one of them, as the first opposition speaker said, are reaching and finding their own version of the American dream. And respectfully, Mr. President, I actually read your term card, and I was fascinated by it. And if I may, I'm moving to the UK in 2015, not speaking any English. I did not dare to dream so big about coming to Oxford. It was unfettered perseverance, hard work, and you can say a bit of luck that has brought me here to Oxford. It has been the journey that has taught me many lessons that I am grateful for each and every one of them. Listen, I get it. My mom and dad were married and divorced 4 times each. Yeah, if I didn't laugh, I'd cry. Okay? I'm not only a domestic abuse survivor, but a sexual assault survivor. It's not a day that goes by I don't think about that. And I was arrested. I was drinking, driving, and stealing at 12 years old. And I'll tell you what, I was arrested. I used to steal food. It was a total shit show in my house. I used to have to sleep with a bat in my bed so one of my drunken stepfathers wouldn't break my fingers because I was a basketball player, and I knew that he knew that it was my dream to get out of that situation. And make no mistake, they will say, oh, you're one of the lucky ones. Well, so are they. They are the elite of our country, go to the best schools, make the most money, have the biggest bully pulpit, and now they're criticizing the American dream that just doesn't raise to the threshold that it's a global nightmare. Because if it is a global nightmare, then they are contributing to it, and I guess I am too. But I'm not. I'm here fighting for America, pointing out the differences that we have. Aside from those shared common values that we all have, we are different societies, and we welcome that. Point number 1, as I've been commenting on, also deals in statistics, which I know are a little fuzzy with you, Isra. And with respect, Professor, 72,000 startups versus 14,000 for India last year. We have among immigrants, 5.5% unemployment. The world's lowest unemployment, 3.5%. Income inequality, yes, it's real, it's serious. But what they failed to tell you is that 47% of all business in the United States is small businesses, like people like me, like my wife, my daughters. 47%, so the whole theory about, oh, it's the big corporations running everything. Yeah, they have a lot of access, but 43% of the Fortune 500 companies are run by immigrants and their families today. So there's amazing opportunities. So it is alive and well. They, once again, did not reach the threshold necessary to say that it's a global nightmare. Point number 2, the independent spirit of the American dream is why the U.S. leads the way in global innovation and development. How many people have an iPhone or get stuff delivered within days from all over the world, or actually have a chance to use Google Maps? I've used it every day here. That's all American creations that have made the world a better place, that have actually made the ability for people to learn and grow and have more and different opportunities. We're an incubator of ideas. You referenced education. This is an amazing place. It really is. You're the luckiest people in the world. But we have 6,300 colleges and universities in our country. You went to some of our schools. Many people here I've spoken to have. And then you're taking that American ingenuity, the ability for you to think for yourself, and actually take that around the world to your homes and dream like you, Mr. President, like everybody in here. To say the American dream is dead means that all of our dreams are dead and there's no hope whatsoever. Well, I'm a glass half full guy. From what I've been through in my life and all of the other people, I've learned from my mistakes. And we are a great country, sir. And we have shared common values. And when we have things like George Floyd, the system works. They went to jail. They were tried and went to jail. And there were protests, and they were right to protest. But through those protests, as we've done in our country's history, we learn and try to grow and be better. Democracy is messy, folks. And my third point is, we're not perfect, but we're not responsible respectfully for all the world's problems. Are you kidding me? I mean, really. And we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. Oh, in World War II, we didn't come in quick enough. Oh, gee, sorry. We didn't come in quick, but when we came, we really rocked it, didn't we? We came and we helped. And what did we leave behind? We left behind the Marshall Plan, which is still working today. Oh, and we went in too fast. You know, we went into these countries, we did it without it going to the UN. Oh my God, give me a break. And we didn't get anyone else's permission. Well, you did it, too quickly, and you didn't get help. And then if we don't do anything at all, I can't believe you didn't do anything. You can't win. We are not responsible for all the world's problems. So in conclusion, since Isra took about 20 minutes, I'll take an extra minute and say, in conclusion, my dream is pretty simple. It's something I dream for my daughters and my grandchildren every day. It's that we have a way to communicate to each other and not cancel each other out. People that we have great differences with, find common ground, find where we agree on things and work and move forward together. That's part of what makes the dream possible. That's what makes the dream of humanity possible, is finding solutions, working together. My dream for you is that you take what you're learning here and in your education here and take that home. Take those dreams home for a better state, country, world. Be part of the solution. Don't be the negative Nellies here who say the world is over, we're responsible for everything, and offering no alternatives. None, zero. What's the alternative? I referenced some already. I already talked about the global nightmares. North Korea, Kim Jong lobbing ICBMs around the world, threatening to wipe people off the face of the earth. That's a global nightmare. Okay? So listen, it's been an honor, and I mean that. It's something that I've ever since you asked me, Mr. President, that I have looked forward to more than anything else in my life. And I have an amazing life. So I thank you. I certainly will be on my knees praying tonight, asking that you have me back sometime to speak, because some of these topics are so great. I just can't wait to get into it, like I did with you at dinner with your factually incorrect statements all night.
So,
what a pussy.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to note, like,
sorry, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So they have okay, seriously though, we had Isra speak for the proposition. We had the music historian take a speaking slot that was supposed to be for the proposition, and we've had two speakers who had a chance to respond to Isra's opening presentation and note what they did. First one, Nadia said she didn't have time to refute what he'd said. And then the second one, former Senator Brown, claimed in his last 10 seconds that he'd refuted it over dinner. Like, when the rest of you people weren't here, Like when I was at dinner with the speakers, I totally refuted all this shit. So that's why I didn't feel the need to like spend a moment on it. Like, at the beginning of this, he was like, oh yeah, she refuted this earlier. She did not. And then at the end, he was like, oh, I refuted it over dinner. Take my word for it.
Oh, what a relief. Yeah, a lot of the heavy lifting of refutation happening in footnotes here. This was a lot of it being left for the annex of the book or something. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. That was really weak. I mean, the weakest thing you can do is go, what is the alternative? What is the alternative? And the guy stands up and says, I'll tell you. Go, just sit down, please. Like, several times, like many times. What is the alternative? What's the alternative? Hitler cutting your head off? Is that the alternative you want? How about something no one's ever wanted? Is that what you want? Like this guy's Rumsfeldian in arguing against propositions no human has ever advanced. Like that's like yes, democracy's messy. That was the main complaint, was that the democracy was messy and that we went too quickly into Vietnam. I'm sure that's what the first speaker said, wasn't it? I'm sleepy. Incredible. Just like the laziest, most pussified kind of remarks you could make. Arguing against things no one said, making up crap, demanding he respond, and then telling him not to respond. He's being rude. And then the ultimate boomer insult, I'll see you on Facebook, which really is throwing down the boomer gauntlet there.
Yeah, I mean, also, I literally just looked it up, and Isra's opening clocked in at 13 minutes and 43 seconds. So that's like maybe 45 seconds longer than some of the other speakers. But he was like, well, since he took 20 minutes.
At least he referred to things that happened. I mean, it wasn't a Senate campaign stop thing. Like he listed things that happened on the record about America. Yeah. I guess no one said that it didn't have a population of diverse people. I mean, the one of the boring speakers talked about that a lot. Like it was advanced. I don't know. This is all the energy of your uncle who's so excited to talk politics with you young people. I mean, that's very specifically the energy here. And, maybe that's, I don't want to be a negative Nelly or a pessimistic Patty or anything, but, I'd really dying for Meagan Day to come in here and slay these fuckers and get rid of all these fascist Francises and so on.
Yeah. I mean, like on the actual substance of it, obviously he made no attempt whatsoever to refute what had been said earlier. He said,
responsible for everything just because you listed them. So I guess we did everything bad just because those are all individual things that we're known to have done. I guess we caused all the world's problems.
It's like, hey, buddy, you hit your kid. You burned down that house across. Okay, if we're just going to sit around all day talking about all the bad, do you think everything that's bad that's ever happened in the world I did? It's like, no, but I think you did all that stuff we just listed off.
We could bicker all day about who killed who,
Yeah, exactly.
It's classic. Yeah. All stuff that's been made fun of better than us 50 years ago.
Yeah. It's the Homer asking the guy if he's an ivory dealer. It's like, well, I've done a lot of things in my life, like most people. I've sold a little ivory. Yeah.
We got the classics here.
Yeah. No, like but he made a big deal of the stats about immigrants in the United States being well off, how many businesses were owned by immigrants, etc. And it's like, okay, at best, this speaks to the point about upward mobility, which, as we discussed, seems, largely beside the point for the most important reasons to complain about economic inequality, because, the smoothest slide of upward mobility ever still quasi-definitionally leaves out the majority of the population. But also, in this case, it's like, yeah, there are a lot of immigrants. There's a lot of businesses that are owned by immigrants. Part of the reason for that is we have an immigration system that makes it a lot easier to come over if you have financial assets.
Yeah, or at least some corporation willing to make you into an indentured servant.
Yeah, get the H1. Yeah. Yep.
It is great too. That is like another favorite right-wing saw, well, most of the businesses are small businesses. Yeah. And they're on fucking a very short leash. Those companies don't live very large amount of time. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics says 45% of new businesses are gone in their first 5 years. I mean, half in 5 years. That's that's not so good. And 80% fail in their 10 years. I mean, yeah, you and your wife have a small business and you ran for the Senate. So you're supported by some bastard somewhere. I mean, please don't force me to go to opensecrets.org to find out who's funding you, Scott. Let's just,
yeah,
please.
I mean, yes, it's like, yeah, sure. I mean, most people who are trying to do this are just barely scraping by. The ones who are dominating the market are not. Like, that's how that works.
Enjoy your small business. You'll be back to work for Microsoft in 2 years. Just really, enjoy it. See it as a vacation.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. This is all a disgrace. Get Meagan Day in here.
Yeah, I do.
I want a new day dawning.
I do also just want to note that it is amazing that listed off all of the people who were killed and all the destruction and chaos that was caused by America's wars is doom and gloom and it's just bad. It's bad because it's negative. But
don't be a skeptical Sam there, Ben.
But okay, but then when he's saying there is no alternative and all the other countries, the other 3 countries in the world are all worse than the United States. He's talking about the war in Ukraine. It's like, I mean, yes, I mean, you're right. That's really bad. But I'm confused about the standards here. Is it I thought pointing the stuff like that out was, doom and gloom and, I mean, why couldn't you just do this? Yes. Russia's bad. Everything bad because of Russia, right? It's like how would that be different?
That is a great point right there. Actually, I really do love how much every right-wing argument, you can just make it about another country, and instantly it sounds like the most pathetic propaganda you could ever say. But that is true. America, we caused all the world's problems. What about countries that have 1/10 trillionth of our military budget? They caused all the world's problems.
Yeah, I mean, I remember
us with our military base in every country, including right here behind this door on this campus. Even
yeah.
What about China has a military base? Did you hear that they have a naval base now?
Yeah,
so that's
yeah.
Soon they'll be taking over New York City.
Yeah, I mean, one day they might get a second one. Yeah, it's incredible. Look at them offering terms. It's like, okay, they're not nearly as predatory as the ones we offer, but even still, 10 peonage. And yeah, I mean, it is incredible. This is one of the things, I wrote an article last year, early in the Ukraine war for Current Affairs called "Is Whataboutism Always a Bad Thing?" And the point I was making there is I actually think it's often useful and clarifying and morally instructive to ask questions that start with that forbidden phrase, "What about?" Because that actually can help you to see if you're applying consistent standards. One of the things that I loved early on. I mean, whatever. Obviously, it's a horrifying event that's led to the death and displacement and dismemberment of vast numbers of human beings. There's nothing good about it, but one little bit of black humor in the early phases of the war in Ukraine was seeing the American mainstream media discover that dropping cluster bombs on populated areas was a war crime.
Yeah, it's been pretty rich to watch. All the Ukraine reporting this whole year now has been very civilian focused on atrocities by the military. And I'm glad that journalism's happening. It's an ugly war of aggression by Russia. So it should be happening. It just really makes me bitter because it shows that the media could have covered it like this the whole fucking time it was us occupying 9 Muslim countries the same at once. They could have done it in Fallujah. They could have done it in fucking Iraq. They didn't fuck one. It's can we get our objectives? Let's see what the president's spokesman says. That's what the story is. Now, who gives a shit about Putin's lies? The story is this apartment block that was destroyed. Just would love to see that so much as a young man grinding my teeth at Bush's wars circa 2005. Where was your humanitarian reporting then, you shit-eating reporters?
Yeah, exactly.
Not to be a blamey Billy about it. Sorry.
Do you suppose they had apartment blocks in Fallujah?
Nah, there's no civilians in countries we bomb. It's just you've seen movies. It's groups of shadowy men in masks. They're stormtroopers. We blow them up. They fall over in piles.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Meagan Day.
New day dawning.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, for inviting me. It's such an honor. And thank you, Laura, for the introduction. Though I must say, Laura, that one thing that you said, I wanted to push back on. You said that if there had been a socialist magazine at the time of Martin Luther King Jr., like the magazine that I worked for, Jacobin, then perhaps things would have moved in a better direction, or he wouldn't have had to make the statement that he made. There was a very popular socialist magazine in the United States at the time. It was called Ramparts Magazine. It was targeted by the FBI's anti-radical COINTELPRO organization, which also targeted civil rights movement leaders, including Martin Luther King. But it wasn't by far the most popular socialist magazine in American history. Neither is Jacobin. The most popular was called Appeal to Reason. Appeal to Reason was very popular in the early 20th century. It was most commonly associated with the American Union leader and socialist movement leader Eugene Debs, who was arrested for speaking out against World War I, thrown in jail, where he contracted diseases that upon his release led to his early death and the demise of that wave of the American socialist movement. So there's plenty of free speech in America, but let's not delude ourselves. It has its limits, right? Now I'm going to try to appeal to your reason on this point. I want to distinguish between two different definitions of the American dream. I think this is a really interesting conversation about whether or not there is such a thing. I think that there are two different definitions of the American dream. I think that the first one is the dream of ordinary people, and the second one is the dream of a small elite minority in politics and industry. So ordinary people dream of freedom and security. They dream of a society where their basic needs are met, where they're liberated and enabled to build loving, strong families and deep, meaningful connections and relationships and communities, and pursue passions of the heart and mind, and take full advantage of the beauty and enjoyment that the world has to offer. These are universal desires, they're not American ones. But America has promised since its inception to be, or at least strive to become, that place, and to welcome and nourish those who seek to pursue this dream. That's the spirit of the words that are inscribed at the base of the Statue of Liberty. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The dream of the Honduran immigrant in California, the dream of the Nigerian immigrant in New York, and the Vietnamese immigrant in Houston, Texas, the dream of my ancestors who came from Britain and France and Germany looking for freedom and security. This dream is no menace to the globe, not at all. So I'm here speaking in favor of the proposition, though, which is that the American dream has become a global nightmare. I think that the former dream, the dream of ordinary people, it's beautiful. It's a definitionally human vision. And to the extent that America has promised to be a society in which this dream could be realized, that is a noble thing. But America has never fulfilled that promise for its own citizens, be they immigrant or native born, nor has it fulfilled its promise to be a beacon and protector of democracy around the world, ensuring that the dream can be realized in other countries as well. The reason for its failure is that economic and political elites in America dream differently. Their American dream has had disastrous consequences around the world. It is in this sense that the American dream has become a global nightmare. Especially since the 20th century, the American century, they called it, American political and economic elites have aspired to achieve two primary objectives. The first is to remove obstacles to the global circulation of capital. And the second is to preserve American geopolitical dominance. In pursuit of the latter, as Isra wonderfully summarized, the United States spends more on its military than the next 9 countries combined, the largest margin in recorded history. That's one country which has 85% of the world's foreign military bases, roughly 800 in 70 countries. And from these bases, the United States embarks on special missions and wages open warfare. The consequences of these activities are immense. America's unofficial military activities and dirty wars around the world have a well-documented tendency to destabilize countries, to exacerbate tensions, to create vacuums in which violent forces emerge, which repress and terrorize local populations. And that's just the dirty wars. As for open warfare, take the disaster of the American invasion and occupation of Iraq as an example. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqis were killed violently during the Iraq War. Over 1 million died, what are called excess deaths, caused by the disarray and degradation of their society, and millions more were displaced, both internally and externally. Ask an Iraqi refugee who has yet to return home, who has lost friends and family to the violence of war, who is injured and maimed psychically or mentally, whether the American dream has become a global nightmare. But the dream of American elites is not restricted to global domination. Its other objective is to remove existing barriers to and create new openings for the expansion and penetration of capital into new territories across the globe, particularly, but not exclusively, US capital. This too has had devastating consequences for the world. In the 1970s, a decades-long frenzy of global capital accumulation finally culminated in a severe crisis of profitability. In response, the United States sought to forcibly open new territory for profitable investment and production, especially in the global South and newly decolonized countries. For some well-positioned residents of those countries, that was like not the worst thing in the world. They profited from the arrangement with Western capital, but they are a minority. For the masses, it's been a totally different story. The process with much more lasting effects has been the ensuing race to the bottom. As poorer countries try to entice Western capital and outcompete each other by offering the cheapest labor, the most attractive tax schemes, the most lax regulations, and the greatest willingness to part with their own natural resources, people suffered, often fleeing land dispossession and environmental destruction caused by reckless expansion of new industry backed by Western capital, which again was the project of the United States in the latter half of the 20th century and remains so. People in the third world began flooding into megacities. Today, tens of millions live in slums in unconscionable conditions. If they're lucky, they can escape by working for a cheap consumer goods manufacturer making a few dollars a day. Their present condition is a result of the global restructuring of the economy along neoliberal lines spearheaded explicitly by the United States. Ask the residents of shantytowns in Sao Paulo and Cairo and Port-au-Prince and Manila. Ask the people who trawl landfills by day and then return to cinder block cubicles to sleep at night whether the American dream has become a global nightmare. Ask factory workers in Mexico and Bangladesh who spend every waking hour producing cheap consumer goods, which by the way are consumed primarily by Americans, under roofs that may collapse or catch fire, or on factory campuses that resemble prisons. Ask them whether the American dream has become a global nightmare. No. Through its proxies in the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, the United States has used financial coercion to force governments to undertake US-approved programs of austerity and privatization. And it has supported right-wing insurgencies and coups to produce political outcomes more favorable to the interests of US and other foreign capital. Contrary to its reputation as a high-minded exporter of democracy, the US is, above all, an exporter of neoliberalism. And in this capacity, it has often openly and shamefully flouted and subverted democracy, as it did in Jamaica, as it did in El Salvador, as it did in Chile, and that's just to name a few. So imagine you could travel back to the 1970s and talk to Jamaicans on the streets of Kingston who were embroiled in a violent gang war that was stoked by the United States, specifically with the purpose of destabilizing the newly elected left-wing government. The government, which was insufficiently favorable to free markets for America's taste. Ask them whether or not the American dream has become a global nightmare. Imagine you could ask the 800 civilians about to be murdered in El Mozote by Salvadoran death squads, again, backed by the US to destabilize a left-wing government that refused to adopt and implement a US-approved neoliberal program. Ask them whether they think the American dream had become a global nightmare. What do you think they would say? What about the tens of thousands of supporters of the democratically elected left-wing Allende government who were subject to torture, interrogation, and eventually execution as they were held prisoner in a soccer stadium during the US-backed coup in Chile? For them, it simply cannot be refuted that the American dream has become a global nightmare. Now, these horrors are not even justified by the excuse of providing for ordinary Americans at the expense of those abroad. I would think that would be a morally reprehensible excuse to begin with, but it doesn't even apply here. The United States suffers from crumbling infrastructure, inadequate healthcare access, unprecedented mass incarceration, unaffordable housing and homelessness, ballooning consumer debt, continued racial segregation and resegregation, reversals of social progress milestones like abortion rights. There's more on the next page. Ruthless privatization of the welfare state, precipitous union decline, and stagnant wages, to name a few. And I'm sorry, Senator, but no amount of startups can make up for all of that.
I know she's not quite done, but goddamn, that was a mic drop.
Oh my God. That girl's got the goods, man. Holy cow. Like that was, I gotta say, it's kind of a strange debate method. Like she moved directly to issues relevant to the question. She had specific things to say. She used several examples quickly to build up a pattern. What the hell is this? Why isn't she like doing a bunch of campaign cliches or talking about like her personal career plan? And where's the song? So first problem right there, socialist, where's the song? Didn't open with a,
Yeah.
She should have come out with a guitar and accordion or something.
There's no song.
That's a problem.
She didn't talk about how excited it is for her to be an editor at Jacobin. She didn't, she didn't go over her, various like personal hopes and medical problems, and she didn't she didn't do the etymology of the phrase American dream. She just like sort of clearly stated her thesis, took a minute to clarify exactly what she meant, and then like spent the rest of it going into the case along the way, actually responded to the specific points that were made by the previous speakers to show why to show why their arguments were flawed. I don't know what the fuck she thinks she's doing. I mean, did she even watch the speakers? This is not how you're supposed to do this.
This is painful for us to watch. I mean, you're friends with Meagan, we enjoy her work, and you see a performance like this where it's like it's completely bafflingly to the point, easy to understand, She's talking as if this is precious time. That's the one thing we could say.
Yeah, she's talking as if she flew to fucking Oxford because to participate in this event, and she only has 12 minutes. That's how she's talking. Like
you're talking about one of the most divisive historical issues. Obviously, a minute and a half of singing is the first thing you would think of, but she said no to that. She's like, wait, I'm gonna zig where they think I'm gonna zag. I'm not gonna sing. I'm just gonna directly address the point.
Did she not get the memo that they had hours and hours to fill?
Oh my God, the loony left is at it again, Ben.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
Look, the American dream has become a nightmare for Americans too, and that's the verbatim quote from Martin Luther King Jr., as you said. And the motion before us is sort of modeled after that wording. And he was right. All right, he was right. And let's not forget that in the last years of his life, Martin Luther King Jr. was speaking against two things increasingly: American imperialism and the merciless pursuit of profit. That is, he was speaking out against the two components I've identified of the dream of the American elite. But the dream of the people, of ordinary people, is alive and well. The inscription at the base of the Statue of Liberty is still legible, and people still harbor in their hearts a hope for a society in which people's basic needs are met, and in which people cooperate instead of dominating each other. They have in their hearts a longing for freedom and security for all, a principled commitment to democracy, and a spirit, like I said, of cooperation over domination. And the fact that that dream is alive and well is our best bet for an alternative. I don't think that we can restrict ourselves to saying simply, well, America's not been very good as the global hegemon, so look at the available countries and pick one that would be a better global hegemon. No, I think we need to have a new attitude of cooperation, a new ethos of commitment above all to human flourishing and not to profit. It doesn't exist in any country on earth right now. But that ethos is very necessary. It's incredibly necessary, not only so that all of the suffering, all of the human suffering that I've just mentioned can finally come to an end, but also so that we can combat climate change, which is the if it proceeds without intervention, and the United States is not cooperating to address climate change, but if it proceeds without intervention, that is the absolute definition of a global nightmare. Thank you.
Goddamn. Like, she clearly had, spent a lot of time preparing and thinking about exactly how she wanted to frame her argument, and this was obviously a carefully crafted thing, but she managed to work in on the fly responses to every single thing of substance that any opposition speaker had said so far.
Yeah, at the beginning, I was a little worried with the like very specific reviews of some countries and stuff. I mean, which is fine, of course. But I feel like the first speaker like blew that up so hard.
Yeah.
I was worried that she wasn't going to get to the thing that he used to taunt the first speaker, which was, what is the alternative? What is your alternative? Please don't speak. What is your alternative? See, he can't speak. All he does is try to speak, and I stop him, and he can't say anything. That's exactly what happens here. Like, that was, so that time was kind of used. I was worried for a moment that she wasn't going to get to the, what is the alternative? And it was very broad outlines, but like, that was like, she did address it. Like, exactly. She was able to respond to these things. I guess maybe she forgot her song, probably left the guitar on the airplane. That's probably what happened there. Yeah, but this is pretty, that was not bad. Don't sleep on Dave, folks. It's pretty formidable.
Yeah. I mean, the way she, she ended, I mean, I assumed that was unplanned, because I mean, like that last minute seemed like very targeted at what Scott Brown had just said just now, right? Which is like, I mean, she didn't even do the snotty thing I've been doing, which is, making fun of the idea that there are only 4 countries in the world, that, the United States, Russia, China, and Afghanistan, right? But like,
just us and the most straw men that there are on Earth.
Yeah, exactly.
Us. That's it.
Exactly, right. So she didn't just do that. She actually like really, passed.
What is the alternative? What is the alternative to live on the poisonous atmosphere and suffocating clouds of Venus? What is your alternative? Gotcha.
Exactly.
Fucking
right?
imbeciles. That's a fucking senator. Like, oh my God.
Resisting the opportunity to mock the ridiculous thing we just heard, and actually like,
man, see, that is tough sometimes.
No, it definitely takes discipline. And then like, but just like cut right through it to, it's like, look, the premise of your question is wrong, right? Because I mean, if you're, at least on a reasonable interpretation of whatever Brown was trying to say, it's like, no, it's not that we just pick like, oh, you don't want the world to be ruled by, American imperialism, so I guess you'd prefer Russian imperialism. It's like, no, that's not it, right? Like that is.
Thank God we have you here to tell us exactly what the options are and none others. Thank God we got you, arbiter of all possibilities, to let us know that, do you want me to own everything, or you can live in the center of the sun if you want. That's sadly no other option exists.
Yeah,
that was pretty formidable, man. She's very focused. She had her notes. Like, it wasn't like a lot of, Brown is such a senator. Like, that was a campaign speech. He's walking. He paces around. He went away from the mic. It fucked up his audio slightly because he was in campaign speech mode. And he's so tall. He's got the super handsome square jaw. Like, he's just like such a machine. And then he comes out, and she's fucking smart, and she's very calmly and specifically laid it out. I feel like she was a great bookend with the first gentleman. What was his name? Like, that was.
Yeah.
Those are the people that you want, man.
No, for sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah. If it had been coordinated, she could have.
Mr. Khan, yes, Israel Khan, right?
She
formidable.
I mean, yeah. If they'd been coordinated, I suppose she could have like skipped a couple of minutes of the historical atrocities at the beginning because he had that in the bag. But yeah, like that was. I mean, the way she opens by responded to this dumbass stray comment from the first opposition speaker about Jacobin. But
Oh
she
yeah,
does,
at the very front. Yeah, that was actually God. COINTELPRO and the Debs era Socialist Press. Like that girl's pulling out like deep historical shit so fast and so effectively. Damn, like that's quite good, really.
no, that is very good. Like she,
And considering that must have been partially improv. Yeah, you're right.
no, exactly. Like I think it was improv because maybe there was some version of that like was set up slightly differently that she had planned, but like it really felt like it was like, yeah, she is just, she's just like she heard that and it's like, all right, I'm gonna frame I'm actually gonna frame my statement around that and have this transition that makes it feel very planned. Right now, I'm going to appeal to your reason, and then goes into this like very nice disambiguation of the, let's face it, vague ass proposition that you're being asked to debate, to say like, look, let me head off this thing that somebody could, like here's a nice thing somebody could mean by the American dream, and actually because I'm not doing America bashing here, actually I'm doing socialism. So it's like, yeah, people dream of of living better lives, and and that's why people came to live in America, and yes, good, right, we want that for them, but here's this very clear explication of basically what's implicit in Israel's opening, right? Of like what it means to say the American dream has become a nightmare, and it's like set up very nicely, right? Okay, those are the dreams of ordinary people. Now let's talk about the dreams of the elites, of big capitalists, the military-industrial complex, all those people. And then it's just a very very tight argument about why that is why that's really bad, and just like absolutely relentless. It's like, oh, you think the people like the Chilean leftists being mass executed in the soccer stadium, do you think they would be confused about whether this is a nightmare? What do you think they would tell you? But not forgetting that initial distinction and circling back to it and saying that that it's like, look, if all of this was at least benefiting ordinary Americans, then I think that would be a morally that would be a morally indefensible bargain to strike. I wouldn't do that, but also it's not even doing that. Right, like it's not like it's not like Americans who defend, benefited from all of this shit. It's not like it's not like you or I got something from those 20 years of occupied Afghanistan, and then wrapping up with wrapping up with back to the the dreams of ordinary people, and we want those fulfilled. And since we're talking about whether it's a global nightmare, let's talk about the it's like, yeah, okay, good question, Scott. What is the alternative? Well, it better not just be let's have some other global imperial hegemon, because that's going to be just as bad. What we want is global cooperation, global institutions, which, by the way, we desperately need because because of climate change.
He specifically laughed off. We mad because we went in without waiting for the United Nations? Come on! So again, a classic right-wing argument. What are you going to do? Some left-wing premise? Immediately dismissible without discussion. That's good. Like it's not much of a comparison. These figures, I feel.
Yeah, no, there is not. So I'm going to be as off topic as one of these speakers for 30 seconds, but then I'm going to bring it around. A few weeks ago, I started on and off, when I have an hour at the end of the day to watch something, I started rewatching a television show from my youth, Battlestar Galactica. And it's a fun show. It holds up. And, but as I've been watching it, I've been thinking, since I watched the entire run of it originally, I remember that the end of season 3 was really strong. And then there were 2 seasons where it just kind of kept going. And, I hope, we haven't got here yet. We'll see. But I hope I have the self-discipline to just fucking stop at the end of season 3 and end at a high note. In that same spirit, I don't think we need to watch. There is a little bit left here, but I think I think this is a good clean ending.
Yeah, I really feel we had a natural structure for this just based on the people appearing. That's a good lesson, though. Yeah, I'm like knowing when you're definitely done.
Yeah,
leave wanting more, folks. Err on the side of less.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a extensive discussion with chock full of vitamins, nutrients, and also whatever the hell those last few speakers were providing. But I think we can call it a night. We could end on a note that we could all feel good about, and say that is how you do it, right? I mean, if one of the things that you want to look, different people, people enjoy watching debates. People enjoy watching people break down things that they enjoy. You don't just watch football on Sunday. You watch people talk about it on Monday night. Fair enough. But if one of the things you want out of it is you want to think about how to do this effectively, you've got the model where you start by singing, and then you just kind of float as if on an inner tube down a lazy river through whatever topics occur to you after you're done singing.
Sure, Ben, but what is the alternative? See, there isn't one. Cut his mic now. I joke around.
Or we've got the Isra Meagan option, which I would go with that because we've seen the range of things people could say in response, and not that impressive.
Yeah, this was a great medley. I'm glad we settled on this one for the evening's subject, because this one's a real education unto itself. You have one or two extremely, bookended really by extremely effective left-wing debaters, who are ready and they're prepared and they have their charm, which is very important. It's a cosmetic medium in its way, but they're ready and there's no fluffy crap and there's nothing about themselves. I came away not knowing anything about Mr. Khan and Ms. Day, and who gives a jolly good fuck? You're there to debate political shit. You don't talk about your career and your favorite song.
I do not need to know, right? Look.
Favorite song, your career plan, or your shitty Senate career either while we're at it.
Yeah. I don't need to know about your childhood. I don't need to know about, I don't need to know about anything, any of the things you've been diagnosed with. Trust me, I'm doing what I can to get you health care so you don't have to, you don't have to be bankrupted by whatever we've been diagnosed with. But that is not why I tuned in to watch you tonight. I do not need to know about what you hope for your career. I don't need to know about what thoughts you have when you're hearing a song. I will allow 30 seconds of that if you're actually going somewhere with it that's gonna be on top.
Pushing it, yeah. That's 30 seconds absolute max, yeah.
Yeah, what I would like to hear is, well, I guess just to put it this way, I would prefer that you give them an argument.
Folks, you're seeing what to do and what not to do. We've done all we can for you.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So tomorrow night we're going to do a clip, but no live stream. But on Saturday at 12:30 p.m. EST, we're going to be hosting a friendly informal debate of sorts between two people who I'm actually not expecting either of them, based on they've both been on the show many times, and I don't think either of them has ever burst into song. So I'm not particularly expected any, but Matt McManus and Lillian Sekerchia are going to be having a dialogue about socialism and liberalism and how to think about the relationship between those two things. So that's at 12:30 EST, which is a slightly unusual time for us, but Lillian is in Berlin, so that's that's kind of what works for everybody's time zones. So looking forward to that. There will be some sort of episode on Monday night. Figuring out exactly what that looks like is still somewhat in progress, but I do think we're going to unlock that debate with JF Greppy as part of it. So I will see people then. Thank you so much, Rob. Read Rob's books. Read Rob at Current Affairs. You can watch him doing a debate with Yarn Brook online, in which I believe nobody sings actually the entire time.
That's disappointing. I don't think there's even like a poem or anything. No, maybe I hum at one point.
Yeah,
this was years ago. It was before I had all the debate knowledge I now have. So like you're looking at a younger debating Rob Larson there. But that's a lot of fun. Check that out.
Yeah, if you were doing it now, surely there would be some slam poetry or some
Cole Porter medley.
Cole Porter medley.
Mr. Brook, you can't do it. Yeah, check that out, folks. I'm on the Twitter machine, Ironic Professor, for all your Rob Larson needs.
Yes, exactly. And yes, Silver, thank you for the reminder at a 7 p.m. Eastern college show on Sunday. Just doing that once a week right now. Going to see how that works for a little while. So do tune in to that also. And so I will see people on Saturday. Thanks again, Rob. Left is best.